Chapter 595. No matter how many glances Meng Wen gave him, Yi Qian maintained his gaze and stood motionless beside the instructor. After the instructor shocked the entire class, he looked at the girl standing proudly like a pine tree and asked in front of the entire class, "Yi Qian, do you dare to walk with a real soldier? Let your classmates see who's the one who's dragging who down. This is my suggestion, you can choose to reject it." That sentence caused an uproar in the class. How could that be? Yi Ying laughed. She was being forced into a corner. If she said she didn't dare, then it meant that she would be dragging the class down if she participated in the military training. Her classmates who were supposed to protect her would also lose face. If she said she would, she would lose even more face. She hadn't even participated in a single training session, yet she dared to walk with a real soldier after less than half an hour of training. She wouldn't be afraid of bursting if she agreed. And Jiaxin was about to suffocate from a heatstroke. When she heard the instructor's words, she was so anxious that she was sweating like beans. Yi Ying, that bastard. She was putting Yi Qian on the stove to roast alive. Just as Jiaxin was cursing Yi Qian in her heart, she heard Yi Qian's calm voice. His strength shook her heart as he agreed to the instructor's suggestion. "Instructor, I have no problems. I'm ready to be inspected at any time." Under the sunlight, Yi Qian's brows were like green mountains and clear waters, but the expression in his dark eyes was carefree. He stood upright with his temperament like a pine tree in snow. When the slanted sunlight shone on his shadow, it was like an unbending spear. The instructor's suggestion wasn't very good, but it contained some probing elements. He wanted to see what this cold-blooded high school girl with the temperament of a soldier looked like. As the first province to expand military training for high school students, the inspection on the 7th of October wasn't just limited to a few leaders. Even the capital's military district would send people over. For such an important event, it was necessary to select a top student soldier, flag bearer, leader, and speaker. These were the students who would represent the spirit of the entire student body on the day of the Grand Review. If Yi Qian was right, then she would be the top student and the flag bearer. How could the students who had not stepped out of school know what the instructor was thinking? When they heard Yi Qian agree in a voice that made their hearts tremble, they all looked at Yi Qian with different intentions. Exclamations, suspicions, worries, disapproval, all sorts of gazes fell upon him. Ultimately, all of them could be summed up into one meaning: is Yi Qian crazy? How could she agree to such a suggestion? It was clearly putting her in a difficult position and putting her at a dead end. The students who supported Yi Qian started to worry. The class monitor, Lu Axayan, walked out and shouted, "Report." The tanned instructor said in a deep voice, "Speak." "Instructors, I think it's unfair. Yi Qian just trained for less than half an hour. How could she line up with real soldiers? Also, just now, he was referring to." LV Sinwei paused. Yi Qian was referring to the instructor just now. Just now, the instructor said that the 10 students who have been training for 4.5 days are not qualified according to the standards of soldiers. I think the instructor's suggestion is unfair to Yi Qian. Chapter 596. Most of the students in the class agreed with Lu Axayan's words. He wanted to speak up for Yi Qian, but he saw the instructor's stern expression disappear. He smiled and asked Yi Qian, "What do you think? Do you want to continue?" Instructors all had the heart of a fox and were good at playing cards. Yi Qian looked at him as if he was looking at political commissar Yen. When he heard this, he took 2 steps forward and stood in front of the class. He smiled brightly and said, "The sun is too bright. Everyone is angry because of me again. Let's all take a break. For the sake of unity in the class, for the sake of not dragging the class down during the big review, and for the sake of all the students being able to train without worrying about me affecting the class ranking, why don't we all sit down and watch the instructor's heroic bearing? As soon as she opened her mouth, there was a round of applause. It was enough to show how popular Yi Qian was in the class. The students who had opinions about Yi Qian could not deny that she had always been the most tolerant girl in the class. No matter who had a problem with a topic, she would always look for her. Even if she had something on hand, she would put it down and help explain it to the other students. This kind of help was a silent help. At a critical moment, it could be seen that out of the 50 to 60 students, only 10 stood out to express their opinions. The instructor couldn't help but smile when he saw this. He said to Yi Qian, "Okay, we'll listen to your arrangements this time." After he finished speaking, he said to the instructor, who had a stern expression the entire time, "Go and gather the instructors of Class 2 and Class 3. The students of each class will rest for 15 minutes. Yes." The instructor saluted, clenched his fists, and jogged away with his hands close to his waist. 2 minutes later, the 8 instructors of Class 2 and the 7 instructors of Class 3 were all present. They lined up neatly and stood in front of the students of Class 1. Yi Qian was ordered to return to the group by the instructor. His movements were swift and nimble as he returned to the group of 15 instructors. When it was 16, Yi Qian's voice was like the rising sun. It was full of vigor as he called out his own number, 16. Before it even started, a simple voice announced the impressive military might. That was a direct hit to the hearts of the students. It had the power to shake a tree. All the students in the class suddenly widened their eyes and Yi Ying clenched her fists. When the instructor heard this voice, he knew there was hope. He shouted, "Attention!" Whoosh! Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The uniform sound was like the wind coming from the camouflage uniforms. The indomitable soldiers used their military poise instantly shocked the students in the class. On the other hand, Yi Qian's legs were pressed together and his feet were accurately separated by about 60 degrees. His upper body was straight, his stomach was tucked in, his chest was puffed out, and his shoulders were spread out. The 5 fingers of his naturally hanging hands were gently clasped together. His thumb was pressed against the second joint of his index finger. His head was straight, his neck was straight, and his chin was slightly tucked in. His eyes were like sharp swords unsheathed from their scabbards as he stared straight ahead. Her eyes, like all the other instructors, were looking straight ahead in the direction of the students of Class 1. The ones closest to her were Yi Ying, Meng Wen, and the other 10 students. In that instant, they felt Yi Qian's gaze burst out with a cold light, which turned into a cold substance and directly brushed past their faces. Cold, dark, sharp. It was just a gaze, but it made their necks shrink in an instant. It was as if they shrunk back a little later, that solid gaze would fall down their necks and make their heads fall to the ground. This feeling made them tremble in fear. It made them extremely frightened, and it made them lose their aura even before it started. Chapter 597. Even the instructor was shocked by Yi Qian's murderous gaze, not to mention the students of Class 1. The moment he saw Yi Qian's unsheathed gaze, the instructor realized that this girl was a soldier who had killed on the front lines and whose hands were stained with blood. Only a soldier whose hands were stained with blood would have such a sharp gaze that was a mixture of justice and killing intent. Shocked, he gave the order to be at ease again. Yi Qian's movements were perfectly synchronized with the instructor's without the slightest bit of incongruity. The 2 simple instructions made the students of Class 1 suck in a breath of cold air. The students of the other classes were also addicted to watching. They didn't even realize that the slender figure mixed in with the instructors was just like them, a high school girl. Yi Ying's hands were clenched so tightly that her palms turned white. How is this possible? How is Yi Qian able to maintain the same movements as the instructors? How is she able to do it? Her eyes were filled with unwillingness. It was as if she wished that she could be Yi Qian and follow the instructors to receive the attention of all the students. Yao Jing, who was closest to Class 1, had dark clouds rolling in her eyes even though she could tolerate it. How is this making Yi Qian look bad? It's clearly making her receive the worship of all the students. She can't do anything right, but she's good at spoiling things. She even said that she understood Yi Qian the best. Is this understanding? Is this understanding personally sending her to the front of all the students and making her the most prestigious person in the school? Wang Dandan's eyes could not turn away. Especially when Yi Qian walked in step with the 15 instructors, the valiance exuded by the movement of his hands made her gasp in amazement. Amazing, amazing. Too amazing. It's actually the same, it's actually the same. Marching in step was a common step used by soldiers. It was usually used to march in a neat formation. In a group of 16 people, it was clear who was slow or who was taking smaller steps. Yi Qian, who had joined the group of male soldiers, did not embarrass himself in the slightest. His posture was upright, and his arms and legs were in sync. His arm swings were natural and graceful, and his pace and stride were as precise as the instructors. He did not fall behind by half a millimeter, nor did he walk half a millimeter more. Wang Dandan did not have any conflicts with Yi Qian. In addition, she liked to read military reports and had a dream of becoming a soldier. At this moment, when she saw that Yi Qian was as handsome as the image of a female soldier in her mind, she immediately started praising Yi Qian without hesitation even though Yao Jing was beside her. It's so cool and exciting. Have you watched the TV series, Two Ladies, Two Soldiers? It's the one that won the National Outstanding TV Series Award. Yi Qian is even better than Chen Xiaomei. Yao Jing's expression turned cold. Dandan, if you still treat me as a good friend, stop praising Yi Qian. Let me tell you, I hate her. She's the one who made me unable to raise my head in school for the past few days. Yao Jing said through gritted teeth. The coldness in her voice made Wang Dandan narrow her eyes. Yao Jing hated Yi Qian, but that didn't mean that she hated Yi Qian. What's more, Yi Qian had become her idol in her heart. Okay. I won't say it. Wang Dandan smiled and blinked. Although she didn't say anything, her eyes were extremely bright as she stared at Yi Qian. She sighed inwardly. If only I could be like Yi Qian when I become a soldier in the future. Chapter 598. Wang Dandan was not the only one who thought so. Most of the girls and boys thought so as well. After setting up his position, Yi Qian gave the command to attention. His left leg moved forward by about 50 centimeters, the tip of his foot pointed out by about 30 degrees. His two legs were straight, and his right leg took a shortcut to his left leg. Just looking at his back made everyone applaud. Yi Qian. You're amazing. Holy shit. Yi Qian, you're my idol. My idol. How can you be so amazing? Yi Qian, be my girlfriend. I need a girlfriend like you who can make me feel proud. Handsome. You're so handsome that no one has ever been before. Yi Qian, how can you be so handsome? Applause rang out, but Yi Qian remained calm. Her heart was as still as water, without any ripples. Before the instructor gave the command, she maintained the posture of a pine tree and did not move at all. She did not even blink and looked straight ahead with determination and fearlessness. At this moment, what you saw was a soldier, a qualified soldier who had returned from a bloodbath. What you saw was a soldier who had earned everything she had through her own efforts. She used her unwavering steps to create her own wonderful soldier. She was a female special forces soldier who stood out like the sun rising from the east. The instructor was used to seeing the soldiers in formation, but when he saw Yi Qian's posture, although his expression was calm, his eyes burned with passion. This was definitely a girl with a story. She was definitely a female soldier who could be brought to the battlefield as soon as she was born. She had military might, a murderous aura, and a murderous aura. Marching. It was time to test one's basic skills. The applause also stopped at the instructor's command. All the students held their breaths as they stared at the instructors, and also at Yi Qian. Marching in a straight line was the best way to display the bravery of a mighty army. That was the military might of an army that had been forged into iron. It was a sharp blade that had the bravery of an army. Yi Qian's aura changed again. It was no longer reserved, but completely released. His brows were filled with killing intent, and his resolute gaze was as cold as autumn water. It shocked the students so much that they held their breaths, not daring to let out a breath. Under the sunlight, her upper body was straight and slightly leaning forward. Her fingers were gently clenched together, and when she swung her arm forward, her elbow was bent, and her forearm was slightly horizontal. This movement seemed simple, but it was actually practiced hard. The bottom of her wrist was about 10 centimeters above the bottom button of her shirt, and about 10 centimeters above her body. With a raise of her hand, Yi Qian immediately calculated these numbers accurately. Her left leg kicked out about 75 centimeters in front of her. Her long and slender legs were stretched perfectly straight, and the tip of her foot naturally pressed down. She was about 20 centimeters above the ground, and when her entire foot landed on the ground, a paw sound was heard. When she and the instructors raised their feet again, there was actually a cloud of dust. There was no applause in the audience, only absolute silence. All the students were stunned. They saw Yi Qian's marching in a straight line that surpassed the military might of the instructors. He walked at a height that they could only look up to, and he walked with an aura that made them feel ashamed of their inferiority. It was too standard, too perfect. It was even more perfect than a textbook, and even more impressive than the movements of the instructors. Suddenly, there was applause, followed by a wave of thunderous applause. All the students who were resting on the ground stood up and applauded and cheered for that valiant and heroic posture. Chapter 599. Did you notice? Her camouflage uniform is the same color as the instructor's camouflage uniforms. She looks like a soldier and doesn't look like a student at all. I'm completely in awe of her now. Oh my god. Didn't class 1 cause a ruckus just now because Yi Qian only arrived today and would drag down their class ranking and scores? What a huge irony. Look at how well he's doing. So standard. She's actually a female soldier, not a student. She's amazing. So neat. If I didn't know that the last one was a student, I would have thought that she was an instructor too. TSK TSK TSK. She said that she only arrived at noon. How long has she been learning? She doesn't look like she just learned. While the sophomores and juniors were discussing, the sophomores from class 1 would have run over and carried Yi Qian if they didn't remember the rules. Yi Ying's face was as white as snow. She hadn't been exposed to the sun. Now that the color had faded, her face was paler than any other student's. Even her lips were pale. She looked like she was suffering from a heat stroke. How could this be? How could this be? She really didn't expect that she wouldn't be included in her calculations. Instead, she was in the limelight. The thunderous applause was all for her. All the praises were also for her. The students who were doubting Yi Ying just now all lowered their heads. They were so embarrassed that even their necks turned red. No, impossible. How could this be? She really couldn't believe that what she saw was the truth. She couldn't accept the fact that she was humiliated even more. Her face turned from white to green, and her originally pretty facial features instantly became distorted like an evil witch. She wanted to rush up and drag Yi Jian, who had become the center of attention, down. She wanted to drive her out of the army and to the dirtiest place. She couldn't accept it. She really couldn't accept it. Why did Yi Qian, that wretched girl, win in the end? She couldn't accept it. She really couldn't accept it. He bit his lower lip so hard that he could taste the rusty taste of blood in his mouth, but he didn't let go. He locked his gaze on the figure of the standing still while running. He saw the handsome figure that was not inferior to the instructor's. He saw her under the sun, exuding a temperament that made him more and more nervous. Faintly, he saw the distance between them. How could this be? One had been beaten and scolded by him since he was young, the other had been cowardly and incompetent since he was young, and the other had been deliberately spoiled by his parents since he was young. How could Yi Qian be better than him in every aspect? When Yi Qian won the first round of applause from the students, the instructor immediately informed the team to send a small team over to maintain discipline. With the guidance of the soldiers, the 8 classes of the second year sat on the left, while the 7 classes of the third year sat on the right. In the middle, there were 18 valiant figures with impressive military might. The instructor immediately decided that Yi Qian would be the top student soldier and flag protector. There was no one more suitable than her. The applause didn't stop for a long time. Because Yi Qian was there, even the soldiers who came to maintain order looked at Yi Qian in surprise. It was rare to see a girl who looked more like a soldier than a soldier. At first, Yang Heng from the third-year class didn't recognize Yi Qian as the last instructor. When he first saw Yi Qian and the other 17 instructors walking together, their backs facing him. When Yang Heng saw the familiar face, he choked on his water and started to cry. Chapter 600. Yi Qian, it's actually Yi Qian. In addition to having a superb memory and heaven-defying observation skills, she also had the ability to hide things. Were Luo Ran and Yao Jing blind? Why did they still provoke her? Yi Qian. Isn't she the girl who made Luo Ran bleed and kicked the basketball like a soccer ball? There were also people in grade 12 who recognized her. Yi Qian had done something incredible on the basketball court that day. She had made the school's famous hooligans bleed. This was not something an ordinary person could do. Yang Heng frowned and said in a low voice, she didn't do it on purpose. She accidentally hit him when she was returning the ball. If this continued, Luo Ran would not let Yi Qian off. I didn't say she did it on purpose. Thinking about it, it's not likely. Yang Heng, why do I feel like you know her? What do you think? What do you think? Looking at this junior sister is really tempting. In grade 12, boys and girls were well aware of the situation. Those who wanted to fall in love would seize the time to find a partner. Those who wanted to study would bury their heads and ignore the outside world. They would only focus on revising. On the other hand, students whose grades were neither good nor bad were more relaxed. They would more or less pay attention to the big topics in school. They had heard of Yi Qian's name but didn't really know her. Now that they heard her name, it was clear. So she was Yi Qian. Yang Heng had always been impatient with these topics. He glanced at the boy in his class and saw the pockmarked acne on his face. He laughed and said, "What's wrong? Are you feeling amorous? Do you see Yi Qian's skin? It's reflecting the sun's rays. It's as white and tender as an egg. You should be more virtuous. Don't go near her. Mites are also contagious." There was a hint of a smile in his voice, and all the boys around him heard it clearly. Even the soldiers who were maintaining order couldn't help but laugh. These words were not false. Other people looked dirty when they sweated, but Yi Qian's skin was white. When she sweated, it was like pure white snow melting. It was as clear as water, giving people a sense of comfort. Her pitch-black eyes glistened under the sunlight. They were like the crescent moon hanging high on a laurel tree. It was so bright that people wanted to be the one chasing the moon. Her appearance alone was enough to amaze the boys. However, her temperament was as biting cold as a sword and as proud as a pine tree. She had a military aura that made them look up to her. They could only look at her from afar and not blaspheme her dignity. Handsome, elegant, virtuous, talented, and well-versed in both the pen and the sword. Such people really do exist. I didn't study in high school for nothing. Compared to the straightforwardness of the science class, the boys in the liberal arts class were much more reserved. There was no other to praise was a compliment. To compliment was Yi Qian's. The break, which was supposed to be 15 minutes, had been extended to 5 minutes. Yi Qian, who was standing in the military posture, had also been standing for 5 minutes. The veterans all had to admit that they were impressed by her. Stand in a military posture is the mother of all military actions. Pull in your stomach, stick out your chest, raise your head, look forward, and spread your shoulders back. Your body must be as strong as steel. You must have your head up to the sky and your feet firmly planted on the ground. At 3:11 in the afternoon, a gust of wind blew, blowing up the yellow dust on the field. Someone cried out and quickly raised his hand to wipe away the dust that blew into his eyes. Everyone stared with their eyes wide open. Almost half of the students were blinded by the wind and sand. Yang Heng and the rest who reacted quickly had already closed their eyes. They waited for the wind to blow away the dust before opening their eyes. They saw the wind carrying the dust close to the motionless figure in the middle of the field. It had been 10 minutes. She should have some reaction by now. Chapter 601. Even Yao Jing had begun to stretch her neck. With the sand blowing into her eyes, Yi Qian would definitely not be able to hold on any longer. Those who were not soldiers would never know how much hard work it took to maintain a military posture. Under Principal Chen's training, Yi Qian had steel needles on both sides of her legs. As long as she moved slightly, the needles would pierce into her legs and cause them to bleed profusely. Her back was straight and her waist was straight. Her wrists were also tied with iron balls and sandbags. She had to look straight ahead. Even if the wind blew and sand into her eyes, she would not blink. As long as the instructions were not over, she would not be afraid of storms, thunder, lightning, or strong winds. As long as she stood still, she would be able to stand tall and straight like a pine tree. So what if the sand blew into her eyes? So what if sweat flowed into her eyes? The army had to look like an army. A soldier had to look like a soldier. A soldier's image, a soldier's majesty. She had to be a deterrent to the enemy and a sense of security to the people. She had to be powerful when she moved and her attacks were sharp and unstoppable. Wearing this military uniform meant suffering. The wind, sand, sweat, and tears were all trivial things that could be ignored. Yi Qian kept her eyes level. She stared at the sunlight that could make one's skin peel off. She stood there for 20 minutes without moving an inch. Even the students who were sitting down started to get impatient. They were already uncomfortable sitting under the sun. How much more uncomfortable would it be for Yi Qian, who was standing still? 25 minutes. She didn't move. Not only did she not move, I even saw the wind blow directly into her face. She didn't even blink. Could it be that her long eyelashes blocked the wind and sand? Are you stupid? No matter how long your eyelashes are, how can they block the wind and sand? Why don't you bring a pair of fake eyelashes and try it out? Even though I rubbed my eyes, it still hurts. Look at Yi Qian. She's standing so straight. Just based on this, we boys can't compare to her. What was there to be surprised about if boys were not as good as her? If he told them that Yi Qian had helped the Public Security Bureau uncover the truth within 4 hours, wouldn't they be shocked? After finishing the entire bottle of water, Yang Heng gripped the empty bottle tightly. His gaze was fixed on Yi Qian. Wasn't this Yi Qian very attractive? Even if all the students in the 2 middle schools were added together, who could compare to her? 1 in 1,000. 1 in 1,000,000. It would be difficult to find a girl like her in 1,000,000 people. She was still standing. The sun's blazing white light began to glow with a faint golden hue, and her body was elongated by the setting sun. On the ground, her figure stood side by side with the instructors, and her aura did not diminish in the slightest. They had trained for about half an hour before, and now they had about 40 minutes. This meant that Yi Qian had been training for almost an hour without any breaks. An hour was the limit for boys, but to her, it seemed so easy, without a trace of fatigue. As he watched, Yang Heng couldn't help but laugh. There was a sense of pride in his handsome eyes. Look, standing there like a ray of light, Yi Qian was Yang Heng's friend. She was so outstanding that all the teachers and students in the school would have a whole new level of respect for her again and again. Vaguely, Yang Heng felt that Yi Qian would definitely become one of the century-old famous people in No. 1 middle school of the province. Her photo would definitely be hung in the school's Hall of Fame, and her junior brothers and sisters would look up to her. Perhaps one day when he returned to his alma mater, he could point to the famous people's pictures and tell them that she was his friend. Chapter 602. Yang Heng was a smart guy. He knew that if you treated someone like Yi Qian as a friend, she would treat you with the same sincerity. She was like a brother to you. Compared to Yao Jing and Luo Ran, Yi Qian was more worthy of being his friend. Thinking of Luo Ran who jumped out, Yang Heng's youthful and handsome face flashed with a trace of coldness. This kid needs to be taught a lesson. I'll find a chance to give him a warning after the military training. As for Yao Jing, if a warning didn't work, he had to think of another way. While the other guys were thinking about how to get to know Yi Qian, he was already thinking about how to solve some problems for Yi Qian. Another 5 minutes passed. The instructor of Class 1 looked at the time and said to the instructor, "She's now qualified for a new recruit to join the company." Qualified for a new recruit to join the company. You've misjudged her. The instructor laughed. They were all standing under the sun. Even without moving, their shirts were drenched in sweat. He stared at the spear-like figure and said, "She's a veteran." Veteran? The instructor was surprised. You mean she's actually a soldier? She's definitely not a soldier, but there must be people from the military training her in secret. Our anti-chemical regiment. Sigh, it's too late, too late. The instructor let out a long sigh. Too late, too late. She was already qualified to be a soldier. It would be difficult for the anti-chemical regiment to recruit her. Although the instructor didn't feel as emotional as the instructor, he still felt that it was a pity that a soldier like a student couldn't be recruited into the regiment. Half an hour later, the instructor finally said, "Attention, at ease, rest where you are." Applause rang out as the 16 figures walked over. Each applause was louder and more enthusiastic than the last. It was as if they were welcoming a triumphant hero and praising her bravery with applause. It was only half an hour, but to Yi Qian, it was like 3 minutes. Years of training had already trained her qi, every muscle, and every bone in her body to the best possible state. She coordinated and balanced her qi and strength perfectly. After half an hour, she felt relaxed and did not feel any discomfort at all. As for the other students, the longest they could stand in a military posture was only 15 minutes. The instructor had intentionally increased the duration because he wanted to shock the students in class 1 who were afraid of being implicated. He wanted to let them know that they were being arrogant and should be ashamed of themselves if they were to criticize them. And Jessin, whose palm had turned red from the slap, turned sideways and saw the figure sitting in the first row on the far right. Anger flashed in her eyes, but she smiled again. She gently passed through the 2 rows and came to stand behind Ying. "Did you see that, Ying? Do you think Jane Eyre is afraid of your little tricks? Are you regretting it now? Ha ha ha, you want to embarrass Jane Eyre and incite the whole class to ostracize her. You're really blind." The righteous Jessin came over to make her angry. She wanted Ying to know that her evil intentions had all become Yi Qian's highlight. "Doesn't it feel good to shoot yourself in the foot? Ying, you're doomed to destruction for your sins. Yi Qian has always known her place. She's always laughed at the things you've done. This is her magnanimity and kindness. Don't think too highly of yourself. If she really wants to make a fuss about it, do you really think you'll be able to finish high school smoothly?" And Jessin was warning her to stay put. Yi Qian might not make a fuss about it now, but that didn't mean she wouldn't make a fuss about it in the future. If she dared to use such despicable means again, it was hard to say who would be the unlucky one in the end. Chapter 603. Ying was already furious. Her eyes looked like they were about to spit fire, but her heart felt like it had been doused with cold water. She was suffering from both ice and fire. When she heard Jessin's voice, she turned her head fiercely and glared at Jessin with her fiery eyes. She turned her head just in time to let Jessin see her snow-white face. Ayoyo, she was so angry. It felt so good. She was so angry at herself. Heart attack. She looked like she was about to get a heatstroke. Looking at Jessin, who always felt sorry for her, Ying said fiercely, "Don't be so smug. We don't know who will have the last laugh. All of you, just you wait. Just you wait. I won't let Yi Qian off. Don't be so ungrateful. Ying. If you dare do anything to Jane Eyre, I, Jessin, will be the first to come after you." And Jessin couldn't even be reasoned with. She couldn't take it anymore and scolded in a low voice, "Who do you think you are? You're not as good as Jane Eyre in literature and Jane Eyre in martial arts. You're not even as good as Jane Eyre. Just you wait. We'll wait. I'll wait for you to suffer a crushing defeat." And Jessin knew at a glance that Ying, who had gone crazy, wouldn't stop. Seeing her good friend Yi Qian become the center of attention, the anger in her heart because of Ying dissipated bit by bit. She smiled and said, "This time, I really have to thank you for letting Jane Eyre shine. From now on, who in the school doesn't know about Year 2 Class 1's Yi Qian? Thank you, Ying." She could threaten Ying and warn her, but she definitely couldn't thank her. She was the one who had personally brought Yi Qian to success time and time again. This was undoubtedly a great insult, and Ying couldn't accept it. And Jessin's words were like a soft knife stabbing into Ying's heart, causing her to feel pain. "Shut up." Ying's voice was distorted as she stared at the back of Jessin, who was about to return to her original position. She was so anxious that her hands clenched into fists, and her body suddenly tilted and fell limply onto Meng Wen's body when Jessin returned to her original position. He was angry and furious. Coupled with the unwillingness in his heart, he finally fainted for real. She was so angry that she fainted. Meng Wen had been sitting beside her the whole time. When Jessin opened her mouth, she was so embarrassed that she couldn't raise her head. She even moved her body to the side, not wanting to hear such embarrassing words. However, when Ying fell, she was so scared that she screamed. Unfortunately, the applause was so loud that only the girl on her right could hear her scream. Even her classmates behind her could not hear her. Fortunately, the 10 students who had picked on Yi Qian were all standing at the front. Yi Ying had fainted, and the soldiers who were in charge of maintaining order were the first to notice. It was common for girls to faint during military training, so the soldiers did not panic. They contacted the medics, and 2 minutes later, a stretcher came to carry Yi Ying away. Fainting was a good thing. At the very least, she could avoid the upcoming storm. No one paid attention to the fact that Yi Ying had fainted. It wasn't a heart attack. Everyone's attention was on Yi Qian, who had returned to the team. Loud screams, long cheers, and the warmest applause welcomed the return of Yi Qian, whom everyone worshipped. Meng Wen also wanted to leave. She usually liked to fight with Yi Qian because without Yi Qian, she would have one less strong competitor in class, and she would have a better chance of getting into a top university. Chapter 604. Unfortunately, Yi Qian was here, and he was so good at it. She couldn't take it lying down. He was already so good, but he still had to take up the teacher's time in class. This made her even angrier. She wanted to make her suffer during the military training, but, in the end, she was the one being put in a spot. The remaining 9 people wished they could find a hole to hide in. Luo Ran, who was being restrained by an unfamiliar instructor, ate a mouthful of dust. His head was pressed against the ground, and his facial features were squeezed out of shape. He couldn't move his body at all. He couldn't see Yi Qian's performance in these 40 minutes, but he could hear the cheers. Luo Ran hated himself for being restrained by this soldier. Otherwise, he would have rushed up and cheered for him. All the instructors returned to their respective classes. They were greeted by the enthusiastic applause of their classmates. Even though their palms were burning, they didn't want to stop for a long time. Yao Jing's applause was just for show. She didn't make a single sound. How could she be happy when someone she didn't like won so beautifully? She couldn't be happy. She only wanted to destroy the person who was like the moon surrounded by stars. She wanted to hide her light and warmth in the darkness. She would never be able to see the light again. Wang Dandan, who was standing beside her, glanced at her with a smile. Her gaze moved slightly as she continued to applaud her instructors. She also gave her applause to Yi Qian, a girl whom she admired. Jing, I think Yi Qian isn't a simple person. As for the matter between you and him, I think you should just let it go. Wang Dandan smiled as she spoke amidst the applause. It was as though they were having a normal conversation. She wasn't worried that Yao Jing would fall out with her. You saw it for yourself. Do you think he only trained for 20 to 30 minutes? How is that possible? It's obvious that he only trained for a few years. He doesn't have such a solid foundation. Don't make a mistake. Not only will you offend Yi Qian, but you'll also make Yang Heng stay away from you. Yao Jing's eyes darkened. She wiped the sweat from her forehead and smiled. Dandan, your words have a deeper meaning. Why? Do you think I'll be too harsh on Yi Qian? Are you sure you'll get the same results as you did in junior high if you deal with her so heavily? Wang Dandan turned her head with a sweet smile. She had a pair of small canine teeth, and when she smiled, her teeth were sharp. Although her rosy cheeks were not as pretty as Yao Jing's oval-shaped face, they were as sweet as candy. Didn't your parents come to school last time? What was the result? We're friends. That's why I'm advising you. Of course, it's up to you whether you want to listen or not. I don't think Yang Heng likes someone like Ying. You don't have to extend your love to her. As she spoke, she even blinked her eyes, as if she was implying something. The smile on Yao Jing's face faded as she looked at her best friend with a cold gaze. After a long while, she chuckled and said, "Love the crow, love the crow." That seems to be the case. After all, Yang Heng told me that he was interested in Ying. He's my brother. Wang Dandan didn't say anything else. She frowned slightly and stopped trying to persuade her. She had known Yao Jing since junior high. Because of their families, they had a good relationship. She knew Yao Jing quite well. She had tried to persuade her, but Yao Jing still hadn't come to her senses. It seemed like only Yang Heng could persuade her. Chapter 605. Yi Qian was indeed not someone to be trifled with. Having grown up in a business family, Wang Dandan quickly realized that Yi Qian was the most beneficial person to her. She had made up her mind not to trifle with him. If you don't know the ins and outs of a person, you should never make a move. Hopefully, Yao Jing would be able to figure it out herself. Following Yi Qian's return to his class, the applause from the entire field was like a tidal wave, each wave louder than the one before. There would always be applause, it was just a matter of time. Yi Qian had used the experience of 2 lifetimes to win the applause that came late. Finally, she had added the most beautiful touch to the most beautiful years of her life. With her ability, she had not let down the most beautiful years of her life. In the most beautiful moments of her life, she had not let down her most beautiful self. Under the command of the instructor's whistle, the 8 classes of the 2nd year and the 7 classes of the 3rd year stood at attention and walked in unison back to their original positions. Probably due to Yi Qian's influence, everyone couldn't help but straighten their backs. The chanting of 1, 2, 1, 2, 1 was filled with the vitality of the sun. Behind them was the 2nd year's class 1. They rushed towards the returning Yi Qian. And Jessen picked her up and threw her high into the air with everyone's help. Amidst the clear laughter, they caught the girl who had brought glory to their class. Yi Qian, you have become the most beautiful scenery in our lifetime memories. With you in our memories, even if we are old, it will still be colorful. Open up the box of memories. Your smile, your elegance today will become the most beautiful memories of our lives. Yi Qian, Yi Qian. Yi Qian, Yi Qian. 1, 2, 3, throw her up. Ha ha ha, catch her, catch her. Laughter and military songs filled the air. You sang about your comrades, I sang about the little white poplar. In this spring of youth, with you, me, and him, it was the most beautiful day ever. Yi Qian was so happy that he couldn't control himself. His laughter was like spring water from a mountain stream, splashing out one after another to make people happy. Amidst the laughter, the instructor blew the whistle, signaling the excited students to put down Yi Qian. The stern instructor gave the class time to gather together and form a tight, inseparable group. Just now, the first class had experienced a split, and they needed this kind of positive energy to mend the cracks. And the best person to unite the class was Yi Qian. She used her strength to let the whole class see that her return was not to drag the class down, but to win glory for the class. Students, do any of you still think that your classmates will be your burden? Will I become a burden to you? The instructor's words made the 9 people in the front row blush even more. All of them lowered their heads and no longer had the confidence they had when they had objected. Yi Qian stood in her original position. Behind her, a classmate whispered, Yi Qian, you're so cool. From now on, I'll only respect you. We almost got into a fight just now. Let's see if the 9 of them still have any face left. Ha, they're so embarrassed that they can't even raise their heads. Ying fainted at the right time, or else she would have been embarrassed. Yi Qian had some people in the class who didn't like her, and so did Ying. Yi Qian always smiled at these words. She didn't like to gossip because she felt that no matter whether she said it or not, if this person's character was really bad, others would know, so it didn't matter whether she said it or not. Chapter 606. The instructor in front of them spoke earnestly, explaining why the students had to undergo military training and why they had to be united. The students who quarreled today seemed to have the spirit of collectivism, but in reality, they were all individualists. They were afraid of being implicated, afraid of delaying themselves, afraid of falling behind, afraid of not being able to get first place. They were afraid of this and that, but they never thought of lending a helping hand to their classmates. They never thought about whether they could use their break time to properly teach the students who didn't understand. All you think about is escaping, all you think about is individuals. Students, your behavior has already violated the meaning of our military training, which is to cultivate the strong perseverance and collective spirit of hard work, to cultivate a good style of study in life. You all still have to learn more. In group activities, the spirit of the group is your pillar. This pillar cannot fall, it has to be supported by someone. Those who have the ability to support it, then help those who are less capable. This way, you will be able to go further and faster. It is not to exclude individuals to achieve individual victory. That way, even if an individual wins, it will not be of any use in the group. These words were not only for the 9 students in front of them, but also for the entire class. With the instructor's whistle, the morale of all the students in Class 1 instantly reached a high point. Everyone's morale was high, and even their voices were louder than ever. Yi Qian had used her own actions to prove that not only would she not be a burden to the class, but she would also lead the class to a higher score. Whoever dared to doubt her would have to take a look at themselves first. The instructor seemed to have forgotten about Luo Ran for a moment. He did not expect such a person to exist at all. It was only when the instructors of the class resumed their training that he coldly and resolutely walked towards Luo Ran. The soldier holding Luo Ran down was not an instructor. If Yi Qian were here, she would definitely be able to see that this soldier had a pair of cold eyes as sharp as an eagle's. The area between his thumb and forefinger and fingers were thick with calluses. This was a sniper from the anti-chemical regiment, and he was also an outstanding sniper. Release him and bring him to the infirmary. The instructor looked coldly at the boy who was as weak as a dead fish. To put it bluntly, this kind of brat needed to be taught a lesson. He was still so arrogant even after being taught a lesson for 4 days. He would definitely become a scourge in society. After receiving the order, the soldier lifted Luo Ran up like a little chick. Behave yourself, kid. If you want to eat another mouthful of dirt, I promise you'll have your stomach pumped tonight. Fortunately, he was a student. If he was a soldier in the regiment, he would have been dragged out and taught a lesson. Luo Ran was a stinky and stubborn person. He was used to being arrogant, so how could he bear this kind of humiliation? He wanted to put on airs and be fierce, but when he opened his mouth, it was as if his throat had been burnt. He was so hoarse that he couldn't even say a word. Fuck, just you wait. Don't leave this place if you dare. The instructor laughed instead of getting angry. All right, we'll be waiting. We're not afraid that you won't come looking for us, we're just afraid that you won't dare to come looking for us. He was lawless. It was not easy to teach him a lesson in the army, but if he dared to provoke the soldiers outside of the army, he would be asking for trouble and would have a stain on his record for the rest of his life. In the infirmary, Ying woke up from her coma after being treated by the medics. Just as she regained consciousness, she heard an extremely arrogant voice coming from outside. Let me go. I'm going to sue you. You're abusing a student. I'm going to sue you. Chapter 607. This was Luo Ran's voice. Ying struggled to open her eyes. Yes, she could still look for Luo Ran and get him to teach Yi Qian a lesson. No, not in the army. He had to do it outside. Also, she couldn't implicate herself. Then, looking for Yao Jing. Tomorrow was a field training and they were going into the mountains. Could she find an opportunity? That's right, that's right. This was a good opportunity. She had to seize it. She had to look for Yao Jing and get her to step up. After all, her parents were officials. If something happened, the school couldn't do anything for the sake of Yao Jing's parents. Therefore, after she dragged Yao Jing out, she had to think of a way to get herself out of this mess. She was still on the bed and her brain was still in a semi-conscious state, but her mind was already spinning fast. The door of the hospital opened. The soldier who dragged Luo ran and said to the military doctor, "I'm afraid he needs to be injected with a tranquilizer." He didn't know the rules in the army. They had to let him know what the rules were and what it meant to follow the rules wherever he went. The military doctor looked at the boy whose right side of his face was bruised and the right side of his body was covered in dust. He knew that he had been taught a lesson. This kid is quite wild. I'm afraid one shot of tranquilizer won't work. I'll need a few more. You decide how many shots to give him. I'll hold him down while you give him the injection. When the soldier spoke, his voice was cold, and it definitely did not sound like he was joking. His hand moved for real, and he flipped Luo Ran over to another bed. The strength of his hand was so strong that Luo Ran roared hoarsely, but there was nothing he could do. He had no way of winning against the soldier. He wanted to show off, but he was in the wrong place. Luo Ran, who wasn't afraid of anything and only knew how to do whatever he wanted, tore his camouflage uniform. As he struggled fiercely, he saw the military doctor walking over with a long needle. The needle was injected, but it wasn't a tranquilizer. It was an anti-inflammatory needle. However, Luo Ran really calmed down. When the needle pierced his skin, he didn't dare to move. The teacher in charge of the school's logistics also rushed to the hospital. Seeing Luo Ran sitting peacefully on the bed, the teacher heaved a sigh of relief. This Luo Ran really knew how to cause trouble. He had never seen such an arrogant student. He even dared to go against the instructor in the army. Why wasn't he afraid that he would be beaten to a pulp? I'm sorry to have troubled you. There are still 2 students in our school who have fainted from heatstroke. I'll have to trouble the military doctor to take a look at them. I'll do the ideological work here. Her own school's students had caused trouble, and it was the teacher who had to step forward to apologize and clean up the mess. After they left, the teacher reprimanded Luo Ran. I don't care what your opinion is, there are still 2 more days of military training. You must behave yourself for the next 2 days. Do you hear me? Who's causing trouble? Who caused trouble? I just ran over to tell the truth. Is that considered causing trouble? Luo Ran had never respected his teachers. The school had recently built 2 computer rooms and more than 100 computers, all donated by his father, so that he could finish high school in China. After taking his family's money, he still wanted him to act like a grandson. The school's attitude towards him was the same. As long as he didn't cause any big trouble and didn't cause any trouble in school, he would be allowed to finish 3 years. The teacher didn't have any requirements for him at all. Anyway, this kind of person wouldn't take the college entrance exam. He only wanted to get a high school diploma. He had no interest in preaching at all. He glared at him coldly and left. Chapter 608. Yi Ying, who was behind the blue folding curtain, waited until the teacher left before she spoke softly. Luo Ran, if you continue to cause trouble, you'll be the one at a disadvantage. At the moment, letting Luo Ran take action was the best way. After all, he hated Yi Jian. Luo Ran, who was about to leave, rushed in and saw Yi Ying with a pale face, lying on the bed with an 4 drip. This was a sickly beauty. Luo Ran's eyes lit up as he sat on the bed. When did you come to the infirmary? Fainted from the sun. Didn't you say you didn't have to participate? Why, is the instructor in your class making things difficult for you? Yi Ying knew that Luo Ran had feelings for her, but she didn't want to interact with this kind of person. His face was swollen like a pig's head, but he still pretended to be cool in front of her. Yi Ying's eyes flashed with disgust as she said softly, Yi Qian has been working so hard since he came back. How can I be a burden to the class? It's just that I didn't expect my body to be so weak that I fainted. She fainted from anger, but pretended that her body was weak. It's her again. Don't worry, isn't there a field training tomorrow? Just you wait. I'll deal with her sooner or later. Luo Ran's eyes were fierce as he said maliciously, I'll go back tonight and think about it carefully. I'll definitely have a chance to make a move tomorrow. She didn't even say anything, but he was already planning to make a move. Yi Ying's eyes flashed with joy as she said in a low voice, You've already been targeted by the instructor. If you do anything else, you'll definitely be noticed. Also, Yi Qian performed so well today. Luo Ran, don't be rash. She was reminding Luo Ran to be more careful and cautious. Alright, this has nothing to do with you. It's between me and Yi Qian. The sound of the door being pushed open was heard. Luo Ran immediately shut up and walked out with his hands in his pockets. He saw 2 boys carrying a girl over on a stretcher. He rolled his eyes and left the infirmary as if nothing had happened. Yi Ying was anxious. She hadn't hinted to Luo Ran to pull Yao Jing in. There was still more than half of the 4 drip left. There was no hurry. The field training was tomorrow. She could go after the 4 drip. This time, he must get Yao Jing involved. There were only 2 beds in the infirmary. When the military doctor saw that Yi Ying had woken up, he instructed a boy to pick up the 4 drip and said to Yi Ying, Student, your condition has improved. You have to give up your bed to another girl. It was only 2 hours of training from 2:00 in the afternoon to 4:00 in the afternoon. Some students with weaker physiques would feel a little uncomfortable. It was normal for them to suffer from heatstroke. Yi Ying wanted to lie down, but she could only get up. She glanced at the clock hanging in the infirmary. Her drip would be finished before 5:00, just in time for dinner. At 5:00 in the afternoon, the military training ended with the announcement of the students. The students of Grade 2 Class 1 were still a little confused. Why did it end so quickly today? He didn't feel tired at all. He was still full of energy. Instructor, it's rare that we still have the strength. Why don't we do it for another half an hour? A boy laughed and said from behind. Hurry up, it's expired. It was already rest time, so the instructor was no longer intimidating them. Naturally, the students didn't have to be so tense. After 5 days of interaction, the instructor was pretty good except for when he was training. I also feel that I'm full of energy today. Yi Qian, you are the source of my life. Someone suddenly roared such a sentence. Instantly, the entire class burst into laughter. The source of your life is your mother. Not Yi Qian. Ha ha ha, if you want to find the source, you have to find your mother. Chapter 609. Yi Qian is the strength of our unity. You have to say it like that. Come, let's sing, unity is strength together. Raise your voices. The instructor was of course very happy. Seeing that his students were all in high spirits, he felt quite proud. Of course, the biggest contributor here was Yi Qian. He was like a catalyst, bringing out all the potential that the students had not yet unleashed. With a shout of "Get ready," the students of Class 1 started singing "Unity is Strength" in high spirits. It was amazing that they took the lead. The other classes did not want to be outdone. On the way to lunch, they all started to sing. It was really a competition of whose voice was louder and whose voice was in unison. Brothers and sisters of Class 4, do you have any? Yes, yes, yes. Do you want to fight? Fight, fight, fight. Where are the eagles of Class 8? Over here. Over here. Dongfang Chue, battle drum thunder, you want to sing? Who's afraid of who? Class 6 is really unhappy. Singing is not loud, not forcing yourself if you don't sing. Why don't you go stand guard? The entire field was filled with deafening singing. If you can sing well, so can we. Let's see who can win. Singing was originally a tradition in the army. Now, it had also become a tradition in military training. First, it was to unite the morale of the troops and unite the hearts of the people. Second, it was to inspire the hearts of the people and relieve the pressure. In the army, it was to encourage the recruits to persevere. In military training, it was to encourage the students to persevere. They would bleed, sweat, but not cry. They would not fall behind if they lost skin or flesh. Third, and most importantly, it was to liven up the atmosphere. The instructors were very strict to begin with. When they shouted during training, it was scary. It was also not very humane. It was also a bit of a blow to the students. Singing together could close the distance and liven up the atmosphere. They could also get to know the instructors better and get along more harmoniously. Class 1 took the lead and brought the 5 days of training to the climax of livening up the atmosphere. Everyone was shouting at the top of their lungs. Some of them even pulled so hard that the tendons on their necks were exposed. And Jessin, who had howled until her throat was dry, laughed and said to Yi Qian, "Our morale is high. Look at what you've done. The other classes are so envious of us." She did not pay any attention to why Yi Qian was able to work with the instructors and carry out their orders like a real soldier. She also did not think of asking about it. To her, there was nothing worth asking about. Yi Qian was so capable. What could possibly stump her? Instead, it was Yi Qian himself who was thinking about how best to break the news to Jessin. Principal Chen's identity could not be leaked. There must be a reason why a world-class sniper would hide in a small town for nearly 15 years. Here, he could not mention Principal Chen at all. There's nothing to be envious of. Since Ying brought it up, I have to satisfy her. Yi Qian raised her delicate eyebrows. Her expression was as calm as the clouds in the sky. There are too many petty tricks. It's like an endless loop, back to junior high. An endless loop. She had to deal with it again and again. It was getting a little annoying. The aroma of the food drifted over. And Jessin could not help but swallow her saliva before replying, "This person just likes to play petty tricks." She's still the same as before. She suddenly recalled the vicious words she had said earlier. Her expression turned serious and she immediately said, "When you were training, didn't I warn her not to cause trouble for you?" She said, "Let's wait 3 times in a row." Her expression was so ferocious that it looked like she wanted to eat a living person alive. Chapter 610. Yi Qian didn't need to think to know how Yi Ying would react. He could even replicate it. Even her voice and tone were exactly the same. Hearing this, he laughed and said, "Why did you have to provoke her? She wanted to embarrass me, but in the end, she saw the thing she didn't want to see the most. If you provoke her again, she will faint from anger." I stood there for less than a minute, and she really fainted. Fuck. Jane Eyre, do you think she will wake up and say that I was the one who made her faint? And Jessin was a fearless person. She laughed and said proudly, it's quite an achievement to make her faint from anger. She's always been the one making us angry, but now we're the one making her angry. Ha ha ha, why do I feel so good? As he spoke, his smile gradually faded. He continued, but I think this matter has been a big blow to her. Originally, she wanted to embarrass you and use your classmates to oppose your military training. In the end, you became the big star of the school. Based on my understanding of her, she must be even more unwilling to accept this. She said such harsh words just now. Do you think there will be any movements during tomorrow's field training? Yi Qian stopped in his tracks. Tomorrow's training is field training. How many kilometers? There was even field training for a long-distance rapid march in the wilderness. It seemed that the military training this time was very important to the province. They even arranged such a strong training program for the students, 20 kilometers. Gather at 5 a.m. sharp tomorrow morning. Everyone, go into the mountains for field training. Just thinking about it, my legs are already turning to jelly. And Jessin immediately focused her attention on the field training. Her previously high-spirited expression instantly withered like a withered flower, and in just a moment, it was gone. Yi Qian frowned slightly. Luo Ran, Yi Ying, and maybe Yao Jing, the three of them could become tigers. They really needed to be careful. The two of them chatted as they walked over. The students in the class had already formed a long line and started to get their food. It was still the same place as before. At noon, the sun was shining brightly. Now, the setting sun was like a brocade, covering the entire horizon with golden light. There was also a large patch of fiery clouds in the horizon, which was exceptionally dazzling red. Yi Qian, our idol must be in front. When the students at the back of the line saw Yi Qian coming over, they waved their hands and shouted, "Students in front, make way! Make way! Our idol is first!" And Jessin seemed to be welcoming herself. She even waved and said, "Hello, students. Thank you for your hard work." Coincidentally, the instructor who came to look for Yi Qian overheard them. He pulled a long face behind them and smiled helplessly. "This female classmate of yours, I've been observing you for a few days. If it weren't for your long hair, I would have thought you were a boy." From the beginning to the end, he had the aura of a man. He didn't have the temperament of a delicate girl at all. And Jessin, who had taken advantage of Yi Qian's momentum to put on a show, turned around and looked at the instructor standing beside her. She said seriously, "Eavesdropping is not the behavior of a gentleman." "Instructor, you're wrong. With your voice, even the class next door can hear you. Why would I need to eavesdrop?" The instructor was amused by her. She was also a very likable girl. As expected of one of the most important classes in the school. The students were all active and obedient. Compared to the classes of his other two comrades, she was much easier to teach. The boy in charge of the food had already heard the commotion behind him. Without saying anything, he helped Yi Qian to the side. The pile of food made the boy in front of him twitch his mouth. His face was full of doubt. "Bro, are you sure Yi Qian can finish it? Don't treat her as a boy's appetite." Chapter 6:11. If you can't finish it, you can save it for supper. You'll definitely wake up hungry at night. Another boy behind the boy felt that it was not a problem to save more food for Yi Qian. Class 1 was a science class, so it was natural for the boys to take care of the girls. Before they set off, Teacher Tong had said that the boys had to take care of the girls. And Jessin blushed at the instructor's teasing and immediately changed the topic. "Instructor, are you looking for Yi Qian?" You guys chat, I'll go eat. Oh my god, I'm so hungry. Forget about chatting with the instructor. She panicked when she saw the look in their eyes. As soon as she left, the instructor smiled at Yi Qian and said, "The instructor is looking for you. Let's talk while we eat." He was talking about them because the instructor saw the might of a soldier in Yi Qian and could no longer treat her as a student. Yi Qian got along with the instructor very naturally and did not feel any pressure. He smiled and said, "Okay, I'll come over to look for the instructor later. Or will you bring me over? Just go to the front and get your food. I'll let the students know." The instructor did not dare to delay the instructor's instructions and said to the students who were already in line, "The instructor is looking for Yi Qian. Time is tight and we need to talk while we eat. Do you guys mind letting Yi Qian get his food first?" "Who would mind?" All of them said in unison, we don't mind at all." They all answered willingly. Even Meng Wen did not dare to say that she had an opinion. Her opinion was not important. If she stood out alone, she would become the public enemy of the entire class. After Yi Qian thanked her, he walked to the front to get his food. The boy in charge of getting his food immediately brought out the food he had prepared earlier and gave it to Yi Qian. "How about 2 big drumsticks? If it's not enough, I'll add more. We have plenty of drumsticks in our class." The military arranged the students' meals quite well and the portions were sufficient. It was just that there would be nothing left if they were late. The boys and girls were exhausted after a day's work. Even if they were picky eaters, they did not have that bad habit anymore. "You're so picky. If you're late, you'll be eating vegetables." The 2 chicken legs made Jessen's eyes pop out. She screamed and saw the fragrant braised chicken legs in the stainless steel tub filled with vegetables. She kept muttering, "I haven't eaten meat for more than 10 years. I have to eat my fill today." "You haven't eaten meat for more than 10 years, so you have to take it easy. Be careful not to stuff your stomach." Hearing her muttering, the boy joked, "There's a lot of food for dinner, and there's a 20 kilometers field training tomorrow. Tonight's dinner won't be full, but you'll be stuffed." Today's class was more harmonious than ever, and the relationships between the students were even closer than before. The instructor was not waiting for Yi Qian in the office. Instead, he was waiting for Yi Qian in the army cafeteria. At this time, it was dinner time for more than 1,000 soldiers of the anti-chemical regiment. During the day, they were training on the obstacle course in front of them. They were not allowed to enter the field behind them, and the students were also not allowed to enter the field in front of them. As soon as Yi Qian entered the cafeteria with the instructor, her sharp ears and eyes heard a soldier say, she's coming." Yi Qian, who was wearing the same army training uniform as she walked into the cafeteria full of soldiers, didn't look out of place. She was a soldier, just a soldier who had not yet been officially registered. Chapter 6:12. Eating in the army was not as noisy as eating in the school cafeteria. Although there was no fixed meal time, and sometimes the leaders of the army would say, eat slowly. But for the soldiers who were used to eating fast, a meal could still create an atmosphere of competence. It was not noisy, but there were still voices. They were not loud and were all soft. When Yi Qian walked past the rows of long tables, she could occasionally hear them talking, but it was all related to her. She doesn't look like a student. Look at her eyes. They are cold and hard, just like the brothers in the reconnaissance team. She also has the aura of a soldier when she walks. She definitely can't be a student. Lower your voice. Don't let the instructor hear you. The instructors had heard everything that they needed to hear. Several instructors had encountered a student who was even stronger than them. Kai Jianqing, who was the closest to her and had served for 3 years, had almost made a mistake. This was not something that an ordinary student could do. Her hands were definitely stained with blood. Otherwise, she would not have such a strong murderous aura. She would not have been able to pressure a veteran who had served for 3 years. Looking at Yi Qian, who looked straight ahead and treated the army as her home, and even the expression between her eyebrows was relaxed. This made the instructor even more certain that she must be a female soldier who had been trained in school. This kind of soldier was a true pillar of the army. Come, Yi Qian. Let's eat together and talk about 2 things while we're at it. When there was still more than a meter between them, the instructor stood up with a smile and warmly invited Yi Qian to sit across from her. She had seen the instructor, the regiment commander, Yi Qian, and even the major general. Facing the instructor of the anti-chemical regiment, Yi Qian's mental fortitude was definitely strong. She put the plate on the table, saluted, and said, reporting in. Only then did she sit down. When she sat down, she sat in the standard sitting posture of a soldier. Her back was straight, and her hands were naturally placed on her knees. She was upright and showed the military etiquette that a soldier should have. When she walked out, she could not embarrass the Fujian town army. Yi Qian remembered this in her heart. Relax. It's time to rest. Let's relax and talk. Her attitude of always being prepared made the instructor even more satisfied. He sighed in his heart, which troop chose this soldier? They made their moves so early. Yi Qian's eyes curved into crescents as he replied crisply, understood. Then, he immediately relaxed like an ordinary student. Even his gaze softened. You didn't eat much. Do you want to add another dish? While the instructors were chatting casually, Yi Qian was occasionally being scrutinized. He ate at a leisurely pace and answered calmly. About 2 minutes later, they got to the main topic. Elite soldiers. Flag protector. She was a little embarrassed to be a top student, but she had no problem being a flag protector. Instructor, it's a little unfair for me to win the elite cadet. I believe you've seen my situation. I really can't become the elite cadet. You have to choose someone else. I can be the flag guard. That's not a problem at all. Hearing this, the instructor was already used to it. He didn't treat Yi Qian as a student. Hearing this, he smiled and said, Are you afraid that others will have opinions about you becoming the elite cadet? Yi Qian, trust me, no one in grade 2 will have any opinions. We will choose a boy from grade 3 and a girl from grade 2. How about this? There's also a student who will give a speech. Why don't you come up and give a speech? Chapter 6:13. Yi Qian wanted to tell the instructor that she didn't want to appear in front of the public, regardless of whether she was going to be an elite soldier or a flag bearer. After muttering to herself for a while, Yi Qian calmed down a little under the instructor's smiling gaze. Instructor, I want to ask if there will be a group photo or something like that. This question had a deeper meaning. If Yi Qian was a normal student, it would be understandable, but Yi Qian wasn't. Therefore, after the instructor heard this, even the look in her eyes changed. She carefully studied Yi Qian again. Then, as if she had thought of something, she looked at Yi Qian's hands again. However, she realized that, at some point, her hands had been placed under the dining table. Because this is the first military training for middle school students in the entire province, it is of great significance. A group photo is essential. The instructor definitely wouldn't hide something like this. Based on her intuition as a soldier, Yi Qian must have her reasons for being so apprehensive. Her skills, her age, and her unusual behavior, these weren't innate. They were trained. In addition to what she said just now, the instructor could completely confirm that Yi Qian was a soldier who had been trained by the military to become an elite soldier. Yi Qian's dark brows furrowed slightly. She smiled and said, "I'm really sorry, instructor. I can't be an elite soldier or a flag bearer. I'm sorry for letting you down. I can understand. It's our fault for not thinking things through." However, the instructor's smile deepened. She revealed a smile that Yi Qian was very familiar with. It was like the mysterious smile on Political Commissar Yan's face. It was filled with the aura of a sly old fox. "We will definitely fulfill your request. You just don't want a group photo, right? Don't worry about that." Yi Qian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She didn't agree at all, but the instructor made it sound like she agreed. She smiled and said, "I realized that every political instructor is like a fox. They catch people off guard. I haven't even agreed yet, and you're already using the reason for my refusal as my request." Hearing this, the instructor laughed brightly. "Ha ha ha, no. As long as it's within our capabilities, we will do our best to fulfill your request. Your request is a small matter. There's no need for discussion. I can agree to it." When she said that every political instructor was like a fox, she was secretly telling him that she was indeed a soldier trained by another military unit. He was really envious. Which military unit had such good foresight? They even knew how to select soldiers in advance. However, Yi Qian might not be assigned to the unit after she joined the military. This matter was settled. To reassure Yi Qian, the instructor said, "The students will not take photos in secret. After the military training, we brought metal detectors of each to check every student's luggage to make sure they didn't bring any prohibited items." The management of the military in 1997 was very strict. As long as it was a military area, even the soldiers were not allowed to bring cameras into the camp. A few thousand students entered the anti-chemical regiment. Other than the routine inspection, the military secretly arranged for a second inspection without the students' knowledge. Chapter 6:14. Needless to say, they found 23 cameras, but they couldn't be used right now. Although the 23 cameras were still in the hands of the students, the soldiers in the army had tampered with them a little, so they couldn't be used even if they wanted to. Dinner didn't last long. The instructor didn't deliberately ask Yi Qian which army she was from, and the smart Yi Qian also hinted that she was indeed from a certain army. This was to tell the instructor that it was indeed inconvenient for her to say. After she left with the instructor of Class 1, the instructor returned to the regiment's office building and walked into an independent office. This was the office of the regiment commander of the anti-chemical regiment. "This little girl is incredibly smart. She probably knew that I wanted to ask about her situation. She was great, saying that it was inconvenient to take photos to block me from asking about her situation. She also said that every political instructor has the attribute of an old fox. Ha ha ha, this is really interesting." She even took the initiative to admit that she was indeed trained by the army. The instructor who came in sat in the chair in front of the desk in the regiment commander's office. He laughed as he spoke to his old partner who was still immersed in work. There was a hint of jealousy in his words. The regiment commander, who was drafting a biochemical training plan for the regiment, raised his head from a pile of documents. The regiment commander had a square face. His skin was so dark that it contrasted sharply with the papers under his arm. He was in his early 40s, and there was already frost on his cold face. Hearing this, he raised his head from the plan. There was a smile in his eyes that hid his sharpness. He joked, "An hour ago, I advised you not to ask about it. The higher your expectations, the higher your disappointment. You're just looking for trouble for yourself. Also, don't spend all your time thinking about how to poach the elite soldiers from other armies to our regiment. Come, take a look at this plan." The higher-ups want to form an anti-chemical regiment that can go abroad to fight terrorism. As the largest anti-chemical regiment in the Nongguang military region, the backbone will be transferred from here. Take a look and then select a few to go. The instructor took the plan. After seeing the names on it, his face showed pain as if his flesh was being cut. You're really willing to part with them? These are all elite soldiers in the regiment. If you transfer them all away, aren't you gouging out my heart? My heartache is no less than yours. Let's go first. The regiment commander looked at the time, stretched his shoulders, and stood up. Take your time. I'm going to eat. At the same time, I'll take a look at how powerful the Yi Qian is to make you smell so sour like a pickled vegetable jar. It had only been a short while, yet he was already thinking about her to this extent. Tomorrow is the 20-kilometer field training. You can go and take a look yourself. It's rest time now. There's no training at night. The instructor looked at the 5-page plan and his expression gradually became serious. The setting sun shone through the glass, telling everyone that the 5th day of military training had ended. When Yi Ying came out of the infirmary, it was already past dinner time. Although it was past dinner time, the boy in charge of cooking still left a portion for her. When the burning clouds on the horizon gradually turned black, and the last faint golden light on the edge of the clouds disappeared, the sky was so dark that only a faint cyan color remained. After admiring the beautiful scenery of the fiery red clouds, the students of each class did not immediately return to the dormitory. Instead, they sat together in groups of 3 to 5 or sat together with the instructors and chatted happily. After a day of training, it was rare that they did not need to train at night. Everyone had a relaxed smile on their faces. Today's topic was mostly about Yi Qian. The instructors had received instructions from the instructor, so all of their answers were the same. Chapter 6:15. Some students have good comprehension skills and can grasp the essentials immediately. A few minutes of training is equivalent to a few days of training for others. Didn't you guys say that the girl from Year 2 Class 1 skipped a grade and went straight to Year 2? This kind of student must have good comprehension skills. The instructor's words were very credible. Most of the students chose to believe them and sighed. Sigh, this is a talent that can't be obtained through jealousy. How can she be so good at everything? I heard from her classmates that her speed in answering questions is enough to kill the whole class. But she's a good person. If there's a problem, they can just ask her. She's never refused. Also, they said that she never takes notes in class. Oh my God, what kind of IQ is this? She can understand it just by listening in class. I really want her to give me some brain cells. She's beautiful, good at studying, good-tempered, talented, and selfless to help her classmates. This kind of person is worthy of admiration. Hearing these comments, the instructors were surprised. Why does it sound like she's not an ordinary person? After hearing these comments, Yang Heng secretly curled his lips. He wanted to say that not only that, Yi Qian's memory and observation skills were outstanding. Thousands of people's brains might not be able to compare to her. Tomorrow was the field training, and they were going to walk on some mountain roads. Yang Heng narrowed his eyes slightly, and a little darkness flashed across his eyes. He stood up. Where are you going? The classmate sitting beside him asked. Let's go. Together. Yang Heng had already started walking and said lazily, not together. I'm going to walk alone and then go straight back to the dormitory. Don't tell me you're going to find that student from Year 2 Class 1. Fuck, bring me along too. The boy laughed. He was just saying it. Yang Heng was a good person, but he was a little arrogant. Arrogant people usually meant what they said. If he said he was going to walk alone, then no one would be able to follow him. Gazing at the stars in the mountains was a very enjoyable thing, but Yao Jing felt so restless that she wanted to throw a tantrum. Hearing her classmates talking about Year 2 Class 1's Yi Qian, Yao Jing's expression turned extremely ugly. When Yao Jing heard her good friend Wang Dandan praise Yi Qian, she felt like her lungs were about to explode. She stood up calmly and said to Wang Dandan, "I'm going for a walk." "Oh, go ahead then." Wang Dandan looked up and reminded her with a smile, "There are snakes in the mountains. The students in Class 4 were almost bitten by a snake last night. Be careful and don't go too far." A snake. Hearing those words, Yao Jing's eyes dimmed before she smiled. "I'm just walking along the track. Let's go, I'll go back to the dorm myself later." There were running tracks in the front and back of the anti-chemical regiment's field. There were street lamps at a certain distance. It was cool in the mountains. Most of the students who had just finished bathing were strolling and chatting on the running tracks. Yang Heng and Yi Qian were also strolling on the running tracks. They were talking about tomorrow's training. He was there to remind Yi Qian to be careful of Luo Ran's tricks. There were plenty of opportunities for him to do so during the 20-kilometer training. But to Yao Jing, what she saw was Yang Heng smiled towards Yi Qian. Although it was not a bright smile, it was a smile that came from the bottom of his heart. It was a smile that she had never seen before. Hiding behind the lamppost, her eyes followed the two strolling figures closely. The hatred in her eyes was like rolling dark clouds, so dark that it seemed like a storm would come in the next second. Chapter 6:16. Yi Qian didn't expect Yang Heng to come looking for her at night. If it wasn't for him, she would have already returned to her dorm to rest. Most of the troops stationed in the mountainous areas were surrounded by mountains and rivers. The anti-chemical regiment was no exception. Although it wasn't as quiet as the troops in Fujian town, it was still much quieter than the nights in the city. It was a tranquility that could remove all the impatience in one's heart. "You really didn't have to specially come over to remind me. You can't use soft methods to deal with people like Luo Ran. You have to use hard methods." Under the dim light, Yi Qian's expression was cold as she spoke. Her back was always straight, and every step she took was calm and confident. You couldn't see the slightest bit of fear or lack of confidence in her words and actions. This Yi Qian had long been reborn. She was no longer the gentle Yi Qian from her previous life who knew she was powerless and wanted to reduce her presence. She could be as bright as the sun in 1 second and as pure as the moon in the next. She seemed to have changed a lot, but in reality, she was still the strong Yi Qian who worked hard to live for herself. Yang Heng looked at the girl who was as elegant as the mountains and rivers at night. However, the image of Yi Qian standing under the bright sun during the day flashed through his mind. There was a trace of confusion in his eyes. He wanted to ask her what she had experienced to be able to perform so well today. But then he thought about it. With his current status, the two of them weren't close enough to talk about such personal matters. He smiled and said, "I was shocked by you during the day, so I came over to take a look at you at night. You're now the talk of the town. Before I came to find you, the class was in full swing discussing you." It was the same in Luo Ran's class. At the mention of Luo Ran, the two of them frowned slightly. Yang Heng's tone gradually turned cold. "You don't have to worry about it when we're back at school. No matter how brave Luo Ran is, he has to shrink back in school." Yang Heng's mind was much more mature than his age. A 16 or 17-year-old youth had a rigorous mind and could hit the nail on the head. He'll go abroad in the first half of the 3rd year of high school and directly go abroad in the second half of the year. I've been in school for less than a year. Sometimes, it's better to bear with it. Luo Ran was an extreme person. He was vengeful and narrow-minded. As long as Yi Qian did something even more humiliating to him, the target of his hatred would immediately shift away from Yi Qian. Now, Yang Heng had such a plan. He was still considering whether or not to tell Yi Qian. He didn't know if she would accuse him of being a busybody. Seeing that they had already walked half a lap around the field, Yang Heng pondered for a while and said in a low voice, "This kind of thing has to be solved first. I plan to do something when I get back to school to divert his attention. Didn't you say that as long as I can solve the problem, I won't refuse? Leave Luo Ran's matter to me. It's better if I deal with it personally." After he finished speaking, Yi Qian turned to look at him. There was a trace of undisguised surprise in his bright eyes. Yang Heng burst into laughter. "Why do you have such an expression on your face? Why are you so surprised? Did you think I was just saying that casually?" Just as he said, Yi Qian did think he was just joking. That day when they met at the school canteen, he said that if she had any difficulties in the future, she would look for him. To be honest, Yi Qian did not take it seriously at that time. Chapter 6:17. Yang Heng wasn't bad, but he was still a 17 or 18-year-old boy. Sometimes, he would act on impulse and say extreme things. Now that she heard what he said, she knew he was serious. Just as she was about to speak, Yi Qian suddenly raised her eyes and looked in the direction of the two lampposts in front of her. As a sniper, she could immediately detect if someone was secretly watching her. Now, her sniper's keen senses were telling her that someone was watching her. Yao Jing didn't expect Yi Qian to suddenly raise his head and look in her direction. Her heart tightened, and she leaned toward the lamppost and retracted her gaze. What she saw was that Yi Qian was surprised by Yang Heng's words. She turned her head to look at Yang Heng, and the surprise in her eyes was met with Yang Heng's laughter. In Yao Jing's eyes, it was Yang Heng's smile. It was a smile she had never seen before, and it was a smile directed at Yi Qian. "Yi Qian, I can't stand you anymore." Yao Jing chuckled. She clenched her hand into a fist and pressed it against the cool lamppost. Her voice was soft but cold as she said, "I have to let you know that there are some people you can't befriend just because you want to." Seeing the two of them stop facing each other, Yao Jing retreated step by step. She quickly hid in the darkness and left. "So it's her." Yi Qian retracted her gaze and smiled at Yang Heng, who was oblivious to her presence. "After your fight with Luo Ran, Yao Jing came to my class the next day to look for me. Yang Heng, you can probably guess the reason. Also, I heard that Yao Jing forced a girl with good grades to drop out of middle school. Half a month before that, you and that girl just finished hosting the school's anniversary celebration." She didn't have to say it clearly. With Yang Heng's intelligence, he knew what she was trying to say. A trace of awkwardness flashed across his youthful and handsome face. It wasn't that he didn't understand, but that he didn't want to think too deeply about it. Humans had an instinctive resistance to things they didn't like. Yi Qian felt a little sad for Yao Jing. Even her childhood sweetheart had fallen out with her. It could be seen that she was the best at putting on an act, but if she had too many bad intentions, no one would have a good impression of her. She was standing under the lamppost earlier. She left 1 minute ago. Yi Qian didn't want Yao Jing to hold a grudge against him for no reason. This girl was much more scheming than Yi Ying, but it was too late to say that now. She was already holding a grudge against him. Yang Heng was silent for a long time before he said in a deep voice, "She's very possessive since she was young. Even if his toy was broken or lost, he would never give it to others. The older they get, the more extreme they become. Even my parents are a little scared when they see them. Yi Ying is quite capable." She managed to keep Yao Jing in check so that Yao Jing has nowhere to vent her anger. That's probably it. Seeing you here gave her an excuse to get angry. Yang Heng's eyebrows were cold and sharp, and there was even a trace of disgust. Forget it, let's not talk about her. I'll look for you less in the future. I don't want to cause trouble for you. To force a boy to the point where he couldn't even have a normal conversation with a girl, Yao Jing's possessiveness was indeed terrifying. 7:00 in the evening was when the stars were dotted with stars. Under the urging of the instructor, the students who were taking a walk to enjoy the cool air began to head back to the dormitory. Near the edge of the forest, a few figures flashed by under the light and entered the forest. Chapter 6:18. What are these students doing in the middle of the night? The soldier sitting in front of the monitor immediately took a screenshot and zoomed in when he saw several figures flash by. He saw several boys entering the forest together. He switched the camera again and saw that these students did not enter the restricted area. He picked up the walkie-talkie and put it back on the table. Instead, he contacted the sentry post. Sentry post 8, 6 students entered the northwest corner. Pay close attention. Sentry post 8 received. Paying close attention. A second later, there was a reply. The sentry did not make any other movements after entering the forest, but the boys sitting together seemed to be discussing something. At 8:30 in the evening, the horn was blown to remind all the students to go back to the dormitory to rest and prepare for tomorrow's field training. Field training was a part of the training in the army. It was very common in the field forces. After an emergency assembly, all the members of the army would be pulled out into the wild for mobility training. Sometimes, in the army, the field training process would also be combined with many different types of training. The field training arranged for all the high school students this time did not have many different types of training. In the middle of the training, there was an air defense evacuation and a quick pass event, as well as a final event. It was also the long-awaited target practice. The students who had not yet returned to the dormitory hurried back. The boys who had just been sitting together in the forest and whispering under the watchful eyes of the sentry stood up one by one. It's all set. Do a good job tomorrow. If anything happens, don't worry, Luo Ran, will take care of it. Luo Ran's eyes were dark and fierce as he warned the boys, if this succeeds, there will be a lot of benefits. If it doesn't, I won't blame you, but all of you better keep your mouths shut. Otherwise, Luo Ran, will turn against you. Liao Jian did not nod and only stared at Luo Ran. Even the moonlight could not penetrate the forest, so naturally, no one could see the expression on his face. While the other boys patted their chests and promised, his palms were covered in cold sweat. Who said the students from number 16 high school were bad? Damn it. The students from number 1 high school were the real bad ones. One by one, they walked out of the forest and returned to their dormitory, quietly waiting for tomorrow's field training. When they walked out of the forest, Yi Ying and Yao Jing, who had been sitting on the lawn, did not get up until they were out of sight. Let's see if they can get it done tomorrow. Yao Jing's smile was a little cold. She shook the belt in her hand and smiled at Yi Ying. How confident do you think Luo Ran is? How confident were they? The corners of Yi Ying's mouth twitched, but she also smiled slightly. I don't know. You saw Yi Qian's behavior during the day. I also advised Luo Ran to be less impulsive, but he didn't listen. Ying, why didn't I hear you trying to persuade him? It seems like you can't wait to teach your sister a lesson tonight. Facing Yao Jing's provocation, Yi Ying was much calmer than facing Yi Qian. She said slowly, Jing, you made me see you in a different light just now. Even I was a little scared when you attacked. I don't want you to be afraid. I want Yi Qian to be afraid. Alright, we're good friends. If anything happens tomorrow, it has nothing to do with us, right? As Yao Jing spoke, she suddenly held Yi Ying's hand. Her grip was strong, just like Yao Jing herself. Whatever happens, it has nothing to do with us, right, Ying Ying? Chapter 6:19. Her grip was strong, but Yi Ying didn't seem to be affected at all. She smiled and said, "Of course. How would we know what the boys are up to?" She didn't know what happened to Yao Jing tonight. She was still looking for her everywhere, but now Yao Jing was looking for her. No matter what happened, she wanted to drag Yao Jing down with her to deal with Yi Jian, that wretched girl. Unfortunately, she didn't manage to drag Wang Dandan and Lu Mei into this. A student ran past them in a hurry. Then, the instructor's voice came from behind them. They realized that it was a school couple who ran past them. They probably did something naughty and got caught red-handed by the instructor. The instructor's footsteps came from behind them. The two let go of each other at the same time. They didn't even say goodbye and went back to their own dorms. In the dormitory, Yi Jian was chatting happily with the girls in her class. She had gone through several field training in the army. The field training in the army was much more tiring than the field training of the students. Naturally, she had a wealth of field training experience. Fill the water bottle with water. If you don't mind, just sleep in your clothes. Tomorrow, when the signal rings, just get up and make the bed. It saves you the time to put on your clothes. Put the towel and toothbrush in the cup in advance. Get up and take the cup to wash your face and brush your teeth. Loosen the laces on your shoes in advance. Those with long hair can braid it so that your hair won't be messy tomorrow morning. Take a comb and comb it a little. It saves you another minute. Put your belt and water bottle together. After washing your face and brushing your teeth, fasten your belt and carry the water bottle. I guarantee that we can all rush to the field in 3 minutes. She explained carefully. All the girls listened attentively. Some of them even simulated it to avoid making mistakes. They were all girls in the same class. Even Meng Wen, who liked to criticize Yi Qian in her studies, listened attentively. She even took out her notebook to write down everything Yi Qian said. This was a girl who was always afraid of losing. Other than always putting herself in a position of opposition to Yi Qian, she had never been like Yi Ying, who would do anything to win. Yi Qian did not take her actions during the day to heart. It was human nature to be competitive. Moreover, she had joined halfway through, so it was normal for those students who had some opinions about her to suspect her. At the very least, they had voiced their opposition directly, unlike Yi Ying, who was constantly trying to frame him. I just checked the time. It's really fast. You must sleep with your clothes on. Braid her hair. We can save at least 1 to 2 minutes. According to what he had just said, all the girls in the class unanimously agreed that Yi Qian's method was very, very good. And Jiesin threw herself onto her bed without even drying her hair. Like a puppy that had just come out of its nest, she hummed comfortably and said, "Thinking about how I can sleep in for 2 more minutes tomorrow, this kind of life is really wonderful." Sighs of regret rose and fell one after another, all of them thinking that they could sleep in for 2 more minutes tomorrow. By the time Ying returned to the dormitory, some of the girls had already fallen asleep. The ones who hadn't fallen asleep were still combing their hair, braiding their hair, or loosening their shoelaces. Where did you go for a walk? You're the only one who didn't return to the dormitory. You don't have to participate in the field training tomorrow, right? Yi Ying's popularity in the class was not so bad that no one paid attention to her. She was used to being a good person, so she would not let herself be isolated and helpless. Facing her classmates' concern, she smiled and said, "I haven't recovered from the heat stroke in the afternoon, so I went outside to get some fresh air." Of course I'll participate tomorrow. This is the biggest group activity in our class. I don't want to miss it. Chapter 620. She then saw a few girls roll their still wet towels into their mouthwash cups. Seeing that almost all of them were doing the same, she couldn't help but laugh. What's wrong? The towels will get germs if they're rolled up like that. Isn't there training tomorrow? Yi Qian's teaching saved us a lot of time. It's really useful. It's good that it's useful. It's just for one night, so it doesn't matter if there's germs. Just rinse it in the water. Yi Ying, you have to prepare for tomorrow's training. Yi Qian's teaching is really useful. Another girl smiled as she replied. She put down the cup with her towel and clapped her hands in satisfaction. Not bad. At least I won't have to look for a towel tomorrow morning. Now, no matter where she went, she would hear Yi Qian everywhere. Yi Ying felt her ears prickle when she heard that and clenched her fists. She smiled and said, "That's a good idea. Is there anything else?" Her gaze was like a maggot attached to a bone. She had already looked around the large bunk room, but she still didn't see Yi Qian. She didn't look for him anymore. Her lips curled into a strange smile as she began to try out all the methods Yi Qian had taught her. Tonight, it was going to be peaceful. Who knew what would happen tomorrow? Before the horizon turned white, the tranquility of the anti-chemical regiment was broken by a sharp and urgent whistle. Yi Qian immediately got up from his bed when the whistle sounded. The first thing he did was to turn on the lights and wake up the students beside him. Hurry up and get up. We have 5 minutes to gather. As he spoke, he had already started to spread out the blankets. When the girls on the left and right woke up, they saw Yi Qian folded into a square, flat, and angular tofu. When they looked at Yi Qian again, their eyes were full of admiration. Oh my, Yi Qian, where did you learn this from? This works too. I'm learning on the spot. Keep up with your actions. Try to gather downstairs in 3 minutes. Yi Qian didn't take the initiative to help his classmates. It was just like some things where you didn't think you were helping others by extending a hand. Sometimes, it was just another way to attack others. He had good intentions but ended up doing bad things. Only after thinking about it carefully would he know whether he should take action or not. There were no strict requirements for folding the blankets. All they had to do was follow the steps. Thus, everyone casually folded the blankets and followed Yi Qian to wash up. When the boys and girls from the other classes ran over while buttoning their clothes, belts, and shoes, the girls of Year 2 Class 1 stood in a neat row, looking refreshed. As for the boys, they were probably stimulated by Yi Qian yesterday. When they chatted at night, Yi Qian also said a few words. Early in the morning, the class monitor, Lu Axan, took the lead. Every group leader was in charge, and they were also the first to arrive at the field. Commissar Yan had said that Yi Qian's unit was definitely a very cohesive unit. It was no exception in class. She used her own charisma to gather the strength of the entire class and twist it into a rope without saying too much or showing too much. Seeing that all the students of Year 2 Class 1 were neat and tidy, with no one late or procrastinating, the students from the other classes wanted to secretly compete with them but also felt a little apprehensive. With Yi Qian around, it was as if they had a stabilizing force. They couldn't be shaken. After gathering and reporting, the students of Year 2 Class 1 took the bright red flag from the instructor and headed deep into the mountains to begin the training of their willpower and physique. Chapter 621. Why am I so excited now? It's like I'm about to do something bad. And Jesin followed closely behind Yi Qian, her eyes glowing. I've been locked up here for 5 days. I can finally go out and get some fresh air. Yi Qian glanced at the excited girl and chuckled. Hurry up and be happy now. I don't know if you'll be able to smile later. Don't scare me. I haven't had breakfast yet. And Justin's eyes immediately narrowed. She was a little nervous. I thought it sounded fun. Why am I so nervous now that you mention it? Breakfast was only available after a 5-kilometer walk. Yi Qian followed the group and said in a low voice, Don't be nervous. Don't you still have me? Follow me closely today. Don't run off alone. Yi Ying was the last to come back last night. The two of us have to be careful today. She's a jerk. And Justin gritted her teeth and glared at Yi Ying's back. Her gaze shifted slightly and she said softly, Why don't we teach her a lesson? The class behind had already set off. Yi Qian pulled her along and quickened their pace. He smiled coldly. What's the hurry? She just suffered a loss yesterday. Even if there's a commotion, she won't do it herself. It's not like we don't know her. Don't be anxious. I'm just reminding you. She was the one who did it yesterday. It didn't seem like Yi Ying's intelligence to do it again today. Follow closely. Don't talk too much. Don't use the energy from walking on talking. As the instructor kept reminding the students in front of him, Yi Qian and Enjussin also shut up. Breakfast was only available after a 5-kilometer walk. The enthusiasm from before gradually faded. After walking for less than half the distance, some students started to slow down. Some started to complain that they were hungry. The separated students from each dormitory walked together again, encouraging each other as they walked. Those who couldn't walk would be helped. They couldn't let their classmates fall behind. Li Qian looked fat, but she was actually fat. If Yi Qian didn't help her walk, no one would be able to help her. The boys would also lend a hand, but Li Qian was shy. The moment the boys approached, his face would turn as red as a tomato. He refused to let the boys help him walk no matter what. He kept stopping along the way and didn't know if he could complete the 20 kilometers of training. 20 kilometers of field training was a challenge for the students, but it was also a challenge for the school and the army. Therefore, the army had always been prepared in advance. Every 5 kilometers of the 20 kilometers of mountain road, there would be a logistics station, with the focus on preparing food and field supplies. The medical security work was also done very well. Medical personnel were arranged to follow him throughout the whole process. After 5 days of military training, the instructors had a better understanding of the students' physiques. They had already instructed the students with stronger physiques to take care of the students with weaker physiques. Walking 5 kilometers in the morning was within the acceptable range of the students. Seeing that their morale was gradually decreasing, Grade 2 Class 1 led the way. After rushing through the forest, they began to sing a military song. In an instant, Yi Qian felt that all the wild animals within a radius of 10 li, such as rabbits, would be scared away. It wasn't a flat mountain road. Instead, it was a mountain road that curved into the mountains. It wasn't a cement road, but a yellow dirt road. The people in front walked past, leaving behind a layer of yellow dust. As there were thousands of students in the mountains, they seemed to wake up especially quickly. After 5 kilometers, the back of the mountain was already bright. Chapter 622. Breakfast was steamed buns and soy milk. There was no picky choice at all. Get up, get up. Don't squat down, do you hear me? Walk around first and then sit down. Don't stand up too hard, or you'll faint. The instructor reminded the students in line before eating. Stand for a while, then slowly sit down and eat. Don't walk around. There are wild boars here. If you get 2 bloody holes from the wild boars, you'll be dead by the time you get sent down the mountain. With the instructor's reminder, Luo Ran said to the 2 boys, "Have you returned the bags? It's up to you guys later." Luo Ran, "That thing can't be found immediately." "What did you hear?" "There are a lot of poisonous snakes nearby." "If there were really poisonous snakes, we would have been scared away by so many of us." The other boy finished his soy milk in one breath and said, "Luo Ran, I don't think this is very reliable. Even if there are snakes, we might not be able to catch them." Hearing him say this, Luo Ran glared and said fiercely, "Damn it, why didn't you say it was not reliable last night? Don't mention it to me today. This thing must be done. Brother Luo, first of all, there must be snakes. I really paid attention just now, there were none. I even found an excuse to go into the forest to pee, but I didn't see any." The other boy also said. He agreed last night and thought it would be a simple thing. Who knew? It would be so difficult. Luo Feng was so angry that his face turned blue. He glared at the 3 of them and threw the plastic cup of soy milk on the ground. "Fine, let's not talk about this for the time being. You guys better pay more attention to the next thing. A bunch of trash. Not even 1 or 2 of them were needed. How could it be so easy to catch snakes?" The army had already considered this problem. It was not the students' turn to discover it. After the first 5 kilometers of rest and breakfast, it was the next 5 kilometers of field training. The first thing they encountered was air defense evacuation. Similarly, there was a fixed area. No students could go around the fixed area. Anyone who tried to go too far would immediately trigger the infrared alert. Before they could cross the boundary, soldiers would appear out of nowhere and pull them back. Damn, I was scared to death. They suddenly appeared with oil paint on their faces and leaves on their heads. I almost thought I met a mandrill. One of them didn't listen to the instructor's instructions and ran directly into the forest when the alarm sounded. In the end, he scared himself quite a bit. This mountain was an important military area. For this military training, the province and the army had put in a lot of effort. How could they allow the students to mess around? The emergency and evacuation plans were all set in advance, and the evacuation route was also scientifically designed. Although the evacuation was carried out in the mountains, the Army's emergency handling ability had always been strong, and these thousands of students were all under their control. When Yao Jing saw a girl from her class being escorted back by a soldier in camouflage, she lost all confidence in the idea she came up with last night. Looking for a snake. Was it possible to find a snake in this situation? Not to mention her lack of confidence, Yi Ying did not know how many times she had complained in her heart. There was a unified assembly point for the air defense unit, and the team leader would bring the students back. As for Yi Qian, because he had not participated in the military training before, he was added at the last minute, so he was not part of the team. Instead, he assisted the instructor in handling some matters. After a round of practice, she returned to the instructors. She was not with the instructors of each class, but with the instructors who were in charge of receiving the students. Chapter 623. After yesterday's incident, the instructors who were tasked with protecting the students all recognized Yi Qian. They chatted with this military-like student as if he was their comrade. There was no sense of distance between them. Come. Let's have some extra food before they arrive. A soldier's voice came from behind. He did not notice that a student had mixed in with the instructors. He even walked to Yi Qian's side. Found something good. Want to try it? Found something good. Yi Qian turned around and saw a soldier in his 20s who had been secretly protecting them along the way. He was holding a non-venomous live snake in his hand as he walked over. The snake's entire body was coiled around his arm. Yi Qian estimated that it was about 1 meter long. The soldier was holding the snake's weak spot. The snake's mouth was wide open. It looked scary, but that was all there was to it. The instructors gave their comrades countless looks, reminding them that there was still a student around. But now, she was wearing the same training uniform as the soldiers. In the end, she did not even receive a single look. She was still sitting beside the student in high spirits. When they saw Yi Qian, the soldiers were stunned. When did we have a female soldier in our regiment? Even the clerks are all male. There can't be a female. Where did she come from? Yi Qian was too military-like. Even without epaulets or collar, no one would suspect that she was not a soldier. You talk too much. The instructor closest to him reminded him awkwardly. She's a student. Be careful. The soldier holding the snake also felt awkward. This snake looks like it can't be eaten. Just as he was about to release it, Yi Qian quickly grabbed the snake's weak spot. Rat-eating snake. Its meat is tender and non-venomous. It's really good stuff. She and Principal Qin had passed through the western province's jungle. They ate a lot of this type of snake. When Ying was escorted by 2 soldiers, she saw a cold light flash in Yi Qian's hand. The light happened to be nailed to a piece of wood. Then, she saw a long snake. Her heart tightened. Before she could react to what Yi Qian was doing, she took a military dagger from another instructor. The sharp dagger flashed in her palm. She straightened the snake's tail with one hand, and the hand holding the dagger slashed the snake's back. Seeing this scene, Ying suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. Yi Qian. Yi Qian caught a snake and was now skinning it alive with her stomach. His stomach began to churn. Then, with a wah sound, he didn't even look for a place to vomit. Yi. With. Why did it not work every time? But this time, Yi Qian seemed to have won before the plan even started. Yi Qian glanced at her and did not look at her again. She cleaned up the snake and wrapped it up with a few leaves. Then, she handed the snake meat to the instructors. That female student is probably frightened. Instructors, you'd better deal with her quickly. Her gaze was strange. After the shock, she did not look away quickly. Instead, she looked vexed. What was she vexed about? Was it because she had not finished something bad? Seeing her here safe and sound, she was vexed. Chapter 624. If that was really the case, Yi Qian wanted to tell Ying to do whatever she wanted. If something went wrong, no one would be able to bear the consequences. No matter how smart Yi Qian was, he would never have guessed that someone would come up with the worst idea and try to get a poisonous snake to bite him. When the boys came over, Yi Qian stood up and did not sit with the instructors. The first group to arrive was led by Yangheng. When he saw Yi Qian standing in front of him, he was not surprised at all. I knew you would be the first. He did not even notice Yi Ying, who was resting beside him. He walked over to Yi Qian without looking sideways. Our group performed once and came back after confirming that we passed. This military training has a military feel to it. Yi Qian looked at Yangheng, who had leaves in his hair, and smiled. Of course it has a military feel to it. Next up, there's a quick pass. How confident are you? The quick pass was also to train the students' agility and reaction speed. The year-end conscription was just around the corner. This military training had a record of the boys' physical fitness. If anyone wanted to enlist in the military in the future, this record would be sent to the recruitment office for reference. Many things could not be seen only once. The military training was not just for the students. It was also the beginning of the military's assessment of each student's basic condition. People like Luo Ran would never be able to enlist in the military. Like Yang Heng, there were definitely soldiers who were secretly watching him. I grew up in the transportation bureau. I've never been in the military. It's not a problem for me to direct traffic. If you ask me if I'm confident in the military's projects, I really don't know, he said with a smile. He did not look tired at all. It was clear that his physical fitness was quite good. Yi Ying, who had vomited until her eyes were filled with tears, finally managed to catch her breath under the care of the medics. She saw Yang Heng and Yi Qian talking and laughing. She could tell at a glance that their relationship was quite good. This discovery caused her to be stunned for a moment. Very quickly, an extremely bright cold light flashed past her eyes. This time, she could completely stop. He left the task of dealing with Yi Qian to Yao Jing. Before she could finish her calculations, Yang Heng stood beside her, acting as if he didn't know Yi Qian at all. It was as if the laughter just now was just an illusion. Yang Heng only found out that Yi Qian was there after being reminded. Now, even if he knew Yi Qian, he had to pretend not to know him. He didn't want Yao Jing to make things difficult for Yi Qian because of him. With both of them like this, Yi Ying couldn't make up her mind. In between, Luo Ran found Yao Jing, but he did not find Yi Qian. By the time he arrived at the assembly point, he was already exhausted. He vaguely heard from his classmates that Yi Qian did not participate in the air defense evacuation this time. Luo Ran's face was so green that it was as if he was about to pass out. He had been looking for an opportunity to make his move, but she had not participated. An hour later, they entered the rapid pass through the danger zone training. The speed of passing through was much slower. In fact, it was very simple. It was just some fallen leaves and some steel nets that needed to be drilled through. To Yi Qian, this was like child's play. After taking a look, Yi Qian did not immediately pass through. Instead, she let her classmates pass through one by one. Sophomore class 1 was a group. She couldn't just leave the class alone and walk first. Chapter 625. The few girls in the class walked in front, while the boys sat at the back, whispering to each other as they quickly climbed or drilled through the fallen tree trunks one by one. Why are you all squeezing together? Are you trying to snowball? The instructor of class 1 saw that the boys were not coming towards him and Yi Qian, but were instead drilling towards the harder areas. He couldn't help but shout. Yi Qian looked over and saw that 2 boys had already drilled through the trees. There were still 3 boys who weren't from his class. How could there be students from other classes rushing into class 1? The other 2 probably weren't from their class either. She counted the number of people on her side and found that it was just right. They're from other classes. Instructor, should we contact the other instructors? After the students in the class passed through one by one, Yi Qian pursed his lips and reminded the instructor, "Don't think that you've embarrassed your class." The instructor was a veteran and was also the class monitor of a class. He had already taught these disobedient students a lesson in the army. Hearing what Yi Jian said, he said to Yi Jian, "Okay, you follow behind. I'll contact my comrades." Not long after, another instructor's voice came from the soldier's walkie-talkie. 3 students from grade 12 class 6 and 2 students from grade 12 class 5. A total of 5 people are missing. I happen to have 5 people here. I'll go and confirm their identities now. When the instructor heard this, he could basically confirm that the disobedient students were from the 2 classes of grade 12. When he saw that Yi Qian had already caught up with the students in his class, he contacted his comrades who were secretly protecting the students and had them go forward to confirm the identities of the 5 students. There was a total distance of more than 3,000 meters. According to the planned route, it would take about 45 minutes to pass through. It was all because this was the last event of the field training. The students' physical strength was severely depleted, so their speed was very slow. The soldiers who were secretly protecting the students quickly confirmed that the 5 boys had sneaked into grade 12 class 1. Only then did the instructor let out a sigh of relief. He could only let them continue walking in class 1 in case they got lost. Gradually, the distance between the students increased. When Yi Qian saw the boys who weren't from his class, he walked past several students and walked together with Enchanting. Walk faster. Don't fall behind. Luo Ran might be coming. Enchanting, who was so tired that she was gasping for breath, suddenly wanted to curse. Unfortunately, she didn't have the strength. In the end, she cursed weakly, "They're not human. They're not students. They're clearly hooligans. What are you cursing for? Save your energy." Yi Jian was not worried about herself. She was worried about Enchanting. She almost carried Enchanting to catch up with her classmates who were lagging behind. Unfortunately, Enchanting. She waved her hand and told Yi Qian to leave her alone. Yi Qian's eyes darkened as he listened to the soft sounds coming from the top of the hill. Sit here and rest. They should be walking in front. I'll get the instructor to stop them first. Since they wanted to deal with her, she would give them a chance. The instructor will be here soon. You rest for a while. I'll leave first. Yi Qian intentionally raised his voice so that Luo Ran and the others could hear him. Then, he walked forward alone. He didn't take the path that his classmates were taking. Instead, he took a more difficult path that only Lu Axayan and the other boys were willing to take. It was also the difficult, fast path that Luo Ran and the others were currently taking. Chapter 626. It wasn't hard to deal with Luo Ran, but Yi Qian didn't want to cause any trouble in the military. She also didn't want her personal matters to affect the entire class's evaluation during the military training. She had already avoided them, but Luo Ran and the others just had to bump into her. Yi Qian's eyes darkened. Naturally, she didn't choose a random place to deal with them. She didn't need to avoid the infrared and surveillance cameras. First, she had to choose a location that was advantageous to her to deal with Luo Ran. She also needed to use the surveillance cameras to prove that she wasn't dealing with Luo Ran, but saving them. It had to be said that the military and the provincial government had put in a lot of effort to arrange this military training. The 20 kilometers field training wasn't a single path to the end, but a detour. The final meeting point was still the anti-chemical regiment's shooting range. The entire itinerary was arranged in a scientific and strict manner. None of the students were allowed to walk an extra kilometer. The 3000 m highway was a combination of a straight Y and a reverse Y. Most of the students took the simplest highway. There were only a few students in each class that actually took the route Yi Qian was taking. Yi Qian didn't walk straight from the starting point. When she walked up, she began to look for a suitable place to strike. When Luo Ran saw Yi Qian walking up alone, he was overjoyed. He waved at the boys beside him, picked up the sticks they had prepared beforehand, and chased after Yi Qian, who seemed to have lost her way and was walking slower and slower. Yi Qian counted silently in her heart. She couldn't hear the footsteps of Lu Axayan and the others in front of her, nor could she hear the footsteps of the other students behind her. She stopped completely, as if she was thinking about where she should go. This place wasn't bad. There were surveillance cameras, camouflage soldiers, and at the same time, obstacles. The single log bridge and the protective net made it easy to clean up. If they fell into the net, they wouldn't be able to climb out. She could accidentally step on them and then climb back onto the single log bridge. Year 2 Class 1 was the first to pass the highway course, and Yi Qian was the first to pass the single-log bridge course. The disguised soldiers on both sides stared at Yi Qian. As she walked down the single-plank bridge step by step, they were ready to rescue her at any time. Then, they saw 5 boys with wooden sticks in their hands rush up to her. The 20-kilometer field training had already covered 12 kilometers. After passing through the 3,000-meter express tunnel, it would be 3 kilometers. If they took the shortcut back to the shooting range, it would be exactly 20 kilometers. After walking for 12 kilometers, Luo Ran and the other 4 boys were actually quite tired. Originally, when they saw Yi Qian stop, they wanted to take a breather and recover some energy so that they could deal with her. Who knew, she would actually stop for a minute and continue walking. Yi Qian, let's see where you can run off to today. How could Luo Ran hold back? He picked up the wooden stick and was the first to rush out. His eyes were filled with ferocity as he stared at her back. At the same time, he raised the wooden stick in his hand and swung it at Yi Qian's head. He was only 17 or 18 years old, but the things he did were so vicious that it could take someone's life. He wasn't any younger than a gangster who had been in society for a few years. On the contrary, he was even worse than them. The wooden stick swung like a gust of wind, bringing with it a huge force. When the other boys saw Luo Ran swinging the wooden stick at the back of the girl's head, they were so frightened that they immediately threw the wooden stick in their hands to the side. 1 or 2 of them were so frightened that they took a few steps back. Fuck. This. Luo Ran wasn't dealing with someone, he was trying to kill someone. Chapter 627. They could fight, catch a snake to scare a girl or anything else, but they wouldn't do anything that would take someone's life. The soldiers, who had camouflaged themselves so well that they seemed to be one with the trees in the forest, saw this, and their expressions changed drastically. A soldier with a leaf on his head stood up and shouted at Yi Qian, "Get down, get out of the way. Get down, get out of the way." Of course, Yi Qian could do it, but she didn't want to. Otherwise, how could she teach Luo Ran a lesson in broad daylight? Yi Qian, who was already standing on the single-plank bridge, seemed to have eyes on the back of her head. She made her move when the soldier shouted, "Get down, get out of the way." She quickly moved to the side and grabbed the wooden stick in Luo Ran's hand. She took 2 steps towards the single-plank bridge and used her strength to pull Luo Ran closer to her. Luo Ran, who was also holding on to the other end of the wooden stick, was suddenly pulled by Yi Qian. He was unsteady on his feet and was pulled several steps forward by Yi Qian. One of his feet was on the single-plank bridge, while the other was still on the ground. Where else can I run to? Isn't this a training exercise? Of course I'm running to the assembly point. Yi Qian, who had grabbed onto the wooden stick, skillfully avoided looking at Luo Ran. She said in a voice as soft as the morning breeze, "Student Luo Ran, be careful. Don't let go of the stick." Her smile was even fainter than the wind, but the coldness between her brows was like the edge of an autumn water sword. It was sharp and piercing. When she approached Luo Ran, her eyes were filled with hostility. "I'm not running anywhere today. I'm just here to play with you." When Luo Ran heard this, his naturally ferocious facial features became ferocious. He roared even louder, "I'm going to kill you today." "Sure, I'll be waiting." Yi Jianwan smiled. There was a flash of light in her starry eyes. Although she was smiling slightly, she twisted her hand that was holding the wooden stick. Luo Ran's entire arm was twisted by her, and even the texture of his arm was deformed. Luo Ran was caught off guard and let out a scream. Luo Ran's scream also surprised the soldiers who rushed out to rescue him. They didn't believe that this girl didn't have any skills. An expert's skills could be seen when they made a move. Her move was fast and steady. It was obvious that she had some skills. Luo Ran, who originally wanted to beat Yi Jian until she begged for mercy, did not expect that he would be the one to suffer the pain in the end. His whole arm felt like it was going to be broken. He screamed as the stick fell out of his hand. His ferocious face was twisted in pain. He's only just started and he's already screaming. Ha, I thought he was strong, but it looks like he's just an embroidered pillow. Yi Qian's lips curled up slightly. Her dark eyes flashed with a cold light. Before the soldiers could reach the protective net, Yi Qian completed a series of actions. She threw Luo Ran, who was in so much pain that his facial features were twisted, into the protective net. Luo Ran didn't know that his attack didn't hit Yi Qian. Instead, it caused him to suddenly fall down. Before he could finish his scream, he fell down in the next second, causing him to scream in fear. By the time he landed on the protective net, his back was already covered in a layer of cold sweat. Just now, he was so focused on teaching Yi Qian a lesson that he didn't see clearly what was under his feet. When he was thrown out, he was completely stunned. At this moment, he didn't even have time to react. He watched as a black shadow fell from the sky and smashed towards him. The ferocity on his face disappeared, and Luo Ran was so scared that he almost peed his pants. He had always been ruthless when it came to teaching others a lesson, but he couldn't let himself be hurt. When he saw the black shadow fall, he naturally wanted to avoid it. Chapter 628. Luo Ran was so flustered that he only managed to roll half a circle on the net before Yi Qian hit him in the back with the stick. The soldiers who had already rushed to the bottom of the net heard the boy scream again. Since she wanted to teach him a lesson, how could Yi Qian let him run away? Yi Qian, who had fallen with the stick in her hand, didn't show any mercy. She raised the stick in her hand and hit Luo Ran's waist as she fell. She still avoided his back and head. After all, they were in military training. If she really made Luo Ran half paralyzed, the school and the army would be in deep trouble. Two soldiers were already standing on top of the net and looking at the two students who had fallen. They weren't concerned about the boy who fell first, but the girl who was being threatened by the boy. How are you? Relax. Get up first. They had heard every word that the boy had just said. Naturally, their priority now was to save the girl. Yi Qian, who was still holding the stick in her hand, answered quickly, I'm fine, I'm fine. I think the stick in my hand hit his waist when I fell. I'll go check if he's hurt. The soldiers wouldn't let Yi Qian check. That boy had tried to kill her. Seeing that she was about to stand up and walk over, they quickly stopped her. Don't go over. Get down first. Yi Qian, who had stood up, swayed, and accidentally fell on the net again. Her body fell towards Luo Ran. Stay away from him. She fell towards Luo Ran. She was worried about the soldiers, so she said, Don't move. Roll twice on the spot. Stay away from him. He had come over to annoy Luo Ran, so how could he immediately roll away? When she fell, Yi Qian said softly to Luo Ran, who was still in a daze, I'm so sorry. I failed again. It's the second time. Brother Luo, I'm so sorry. Luo Ran was in so much pain that he felt like his bones were broken. He didn't have time to care about Yi Qian. When he heard Yi Qian's words, he immediately understood that she did it on purpose. As a man, he was bullied by a woman to such an extent. How could he still survive? You did it on purpose. Fuck, if I don't kill you this time, my surname isn't Luo. After suffering 2 losses in a row, Luo Ran only felt that he had lost all his face. When he thought that the other 4 men might be watching, the fire in his heart burned until his eyes turned red. His mouth spat out ruthless words endlessly. He was so arrogant that he really didn't put the entire army in his eyes. Luo Ran, who was in so much pain that he couldn't get up, was now like a crazy wild dog. When he saw Yi Qian at his feet, he didn't stand up, so he directly rubbed his legs against Yi Qian. "I'm going to kill you, damn it. If worse comes to worst, I'll just spend more money. Fuck you. You dare to oppose me? Killing you is as easy as killing an ant." The smile in Yi Qian's eyes deepened. "Then give it a try and see if it's simple or not." She forced Luo Ran to be even angrier. She wanted all the soldiers to testify that everything had nothing to do with her, Yi Qian. Under her provocation, Luo Ran's ruthless words angered the soldiers. How could he be so arrogant? He wasn't a student, he was a lawless hooligan. He relied on his family's wealth and always believed that there was nothing in the world that money couldn't solve. Seeing that the boy was kicking the girl with both legs, the soldiers below shouted, "Cut the net, cut the net." Chapter 629. His voice traveled to the top of the bridge, scaring the other 4 boys who hadn't taken the bridge yet. What was going on? Luo Ran was scared just now, but why did he sound so angry now? In front of a group of soldiers, he said he was going to kill Yi Qian. The 4 of them looked at each other and said anxiously, "Quick, let's go take a look." In the midst of the chaos, someone said they would go take a look, and they all ran towards the single log bridge. A soldier in disguise walked out from behind a tree and blocked their way. He pointed at a single log bridge and said, "The 4 of you cross from here." The 4 boys, who were already panicking, broke out in a cold sweat when they saw the soldiers suddenly appear. They stammered, "Instructor, how are they?" "Mind your own business." The soldier didn't tell them what was going on below. He stood in front of them and used his body to block the boys' view. He said sternly, "Cross the bridge quickly, one by one. Keep a distance of half a meter." After being urged by the soldier, the 4 of them, who were already feeling guilty, didn't dare to look anymore. They pushed each other and hurried to cross the bridge. When they walked to another single-plank bridge and looked down, they saw a large net about a meter away from the single-plank bridge. The net was covered with dead leaves. It turned out that there was a protective net below. Even if they fell, they would be fine. Wiping away his cold sweat, one of the boys took the lead to cross the single-log bridge. He subconsciously looked to his left and saw Luo Ran kicking Yi Qian like a madman. That ferocity was really. Even the boys were scared out of their wits. But it was fine as long as Luo Ran was fine. The boy turned his head and whispered to the students behind him who were preparing to cross the bridge, "Brother Luo is fine. Let's go over and help him first." Luo Ran screamed when she fell into the net. Brother Luo was really scared this time. The girl didn't even make a sound when she fell. Fortunately, the 4 of them didn't rush up like Luo Ran. Otherwise, Yi Qian would have taken care of them together. How could Yi Qian let him kick her? She still had the baton in her hands. With the first kick, Yi Jianjian secretly smashed Luo Ran's calf with a stick. She was confident that the soldiers below wouldn't be able to see through the close-range combat while secretly taking care of Luo Ran. In the eyes of the soldiers, it was clearly the boy who kicked the girl to the ground, but the one who screamed was the boy. How could Luo Ran not shout? He was in pain. Her small feet were in pain from being hit by the stick. How could she still kick Yi Qian in an orderly manner? She was purely in so much pain that she was kicking randomly. You call this making life difficult for me? You want to teach me a lesson? Luo Ran, even if I crippled you now, nothing would happen to you. He called out again and again, but Yi Qian spoke calmly. His voice was not loud enough for the soldiers below to hear, but it was loud enough for Luo Ran to hear clearly. The more she said this, the angrier Luo Ran became. But he didn't dare to kick anymore. His legs were in so much pain that he couldn't exert any strength. The protective net on the tree was cut. Luo Ran, who didn't grab the net, was the first to fall. Yi Qian grabbed the net with one hand and didn't let herself fall. Fuck you. Yi Qian, get over here. You stinking soldiers, I have plenty of money at home. Kill her for me. I'll give you money, give you money. Fuck, it hurts so much. Ambulance, I want an ambulance. The words coming out of his mouth were getting more and more nonsensical. When the two soldiers who caught him heard him, they wished they could throw him out immediately. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.